cereal kids are crazy for, Cthulhu. Start your morning madness with a bowl of morning happiness.
Cthulhu sale is ongoing now. You will take part. Save up to 33% off gem bundles. You will take part.
Crazy crispity, crazy crunchity, crazy
Select chests up to 50% off. You will take part. Boosters, avatars, wards, and more up to 50% off. You will take part. Party up with up to 3 times favor. Worshippers and XP. You will take part. This is your duty.
Crazy Cthulhu-y. Cthulhu. Certain General's warning, Cthulhu's are not of this world and should not be ingested by children or adults over the age of 80. Gems are not included as a prize because Cthulhu's are not real. Reality is meaningless, time's a construct. They not all hope when you ingest Cthulhu's. Use as directed, part of balanced breakfast. For the crispity, crunchity, crazy crunch, get cuckoo with Cthulhu.
You will take part.
Of a balanced breakfast.
Can we take a commercial break?
Welcome back, Smite fans, to our second set of the day here for the Smite Challenger Circuit. Pandamonium and Goodnight Nick will face off. Before we get to that, if you haven't had an opportunity to buy your gems just yet, maybe you're waiting for your paycheck to hit through, don't worry, you still have some time. September 6th will be the last day of the Cthulhu Gen Sale, and your last chance to get some skins, wards, avatars, boosters, chests, voice packs, emotes, anything in the game that you might want. You can get on sale, or you can get gems on sale in order to pick those up to 33% off at the top end for some of those gem bundles. So make sure to pick those up if you haven't already. September 6th will be your last day for it. J-Mac Tucker and Taco joining me here for our second set of the day. Pandamonium and Goodnight Nick facing off. Both teams sitting around that middle bottom of the pack. Pandamonium at a nice 2-2 /line. Meanwhile, Goodnight Nick have been struggling in this first half of the phase so far.
It could be a very important moment, I think, for Pandamonium to try and further establish themselves as one of the primary contenders for the likes of the rest of the European SCC that has had a little bit more success here. And as for Goodnight Nick, J-Mac, well, clearly a little bit more of the downs than ups for this team, but that could all change here today.
Pandamonium now on the rise. They were sitting at a 1-2 as we go ahead and take a look at the schedules and standings for the day if you're just now tuning in for it. But Pandamonium on the rise, as I mentioned for it. They just got a new roster swap up around here. Hawk, Joshi, Kana, Cherio moving over off of Joystick and onto this team, then Shoxy Foxy coming back. Looking at the schedule, Pandemonium, Goodnight Nick now. Later we'll have some NA games afterward, and taking a look at the standings. As previously mentioned, it's a 2-2 for Pandemonium after their win last week, and Goodnight Nick are struggling to try and find that second win.
Yeah, it's primarily just been Elysium and Team Joystick running the top of the European SCC so far, but again, with some of these roster shakeups that have taken place, most notably the one for Pandemonium, you have to remember that was originally Cherio that was rocking with the other squad, and now that he's here with Pandemonium, I think that a lot of his experience is certainly going to be able to factor in here.
And it doesn't look like it's hurt Pandemonium any making all these kinds of shakeups here, moving Joshi over to the Hunter position away from mid, and now bringing Hawk into this mid lane spot. We're able to look real good for Pandemonium, and even bringing Shoxy Foxy back in brings a nice little bit of variety to their support role more than anything. I know that Shoxy does like playing Kumba support. That's kind of a fun one that he likes to run back over to. The only other player really playing Kuma Karn is like Lamogao, but that's in solo lane, and I don't really count that one because it's a whole different play style compared to your standard Kumba.
I'm glad that you brought up Hawk, though, as a mid lane asset here, and this re-roll swap back into the ADC position here for Joshi. No hate to Joshi on the mid lane performances by any means, but when it comes down to it, J-Mac, I think that Joshi, originally established himself as a player in Smite competitive in general when he was in that Hunter position. So to see him be able to transition back to that, it'll almost be like riding a bike, I would definitely assume.
And one of the areas that Pandemonium was really struggling was kind of that late game shot calling. They could get the early game just fine, but when it came to the late game, they really struggled for some of their team fights for figuring out exactly where they needed to go beyond there. So adding Cherio to this roster, giving them a little bit of veteranship with how long Cherio's been playing the game, and giving them a little bit of that shot call, and also bringing some diversity into the jungle. We see Circuit coming out of him. Loki is another one that they like to go. It kind of shifts things up compared to what we normally see.
I think as far as Cherio's jungle arsenal is concerned, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go as far as the Kali straight into the Athena swap-ups. It's that interesting dynamic that he brings to any sort of team fighting environment, and I think that this is a team that'll definitely complement his playstyle, since Cherio's always come across as a little bit more of a plug-and-play individual, especially in terms of drafting, so I think that'll fit in quite nicely with this roster.
And if we want to talk interesting dynamics and shakeups, we cannot ignore the Goodnight Nick roster. These guys love playing the more out there selections. Deathwalker bringing a Mulan solo at one point. Ice, I know in his past has played a Sylvanas jungle. Didn't go well, but we'll move on beyond there. So a lot of interesting stuff that can come from Goodnight Nick. Also, important to note, Alpha Jackal, the previous coach of Goodnight Nick, has stepped down, so we may be seeing a difference in some shakeups here amongst how they do their picks and bans and maybe how this team can perform as it goes through. We'll have to see what that impact of losing their coach will do for them.
Well, they've also got Okeanos in general subbing in for Emilzy, so having Okeanos in that support role position, I would assume at least that it's Okeanos playing the support role if he's subbing for Emilzy, but I have to remember Okeanos, he was originally playing Hunter, so it'll definitely be interesting to see exactly how he meshes into that support play style, because going from one extreme to the next, and I say it as an extreme, but Frontline has more or less been very crucial in the Season 8 meta as far as competitive play is concerned, and so for Okeanos to now essentially be 180ing from that original position of Hunter to now being the one trying to protect the Hunter, it could definitely be an interesting shakeup.
And I think that is one interesting thing from it is, you're going from backline to frontline, or maybe, tankier backline amongst it, but it's two very different worlds. Normally you want to be the one dealing the damage, but maybe going from that Hunter to support, you kind of know what your Hunter wants. You know what your mid lane wants out of a tank, so it kind of gives you that mentality. Now it's just, a matter of executing that mentality forward. We'll see what kind of changes happen here for picks and bans for these teams. Game number 1 is ready to go for our picks and bans. I'm curious as to where all these drafts will go. Hawk has really been prioritizing some of these auto-attack-centric mid laners. Things like Soul has been one of his top go-tos. In fact, it had to get banned away from him last week after his explosive early game performance.
And it's going to be a frontline focus so far from Pandamonium. I think this is definitely the right direction to take, J-Mac. You know they have a sub coming in for that support role position. Sobek, I think, being one of the more kind of training wheels-based Guardians. I mean, he has a lot of peel, has a lot of initiation right off the bat. So I like this takeaway from Pandamonium, and it seems as though they're going to keep the frontline assets completely removed here. Fafnir, Odin, also going to be joining those initial top 3 bans. And on the other hand, Goodnight Nick, I mean, you talked about the Soul, and sure enough, Goodnight Nick, they're not trying to deal with Hawk's mid lane pool.
Look, all I'm saying is when Hawk at level 2 can walk to your red buff and pick up a double kill in the process, it's probably a god you want to keep out of his hands for it. But not just the Soul, the Artemis and the Tiamat will also be banned away for Goodnight Nick. Flip side, you highlighted the 3 frontliners taken away between the Sobek, Fafnir, and Odin, but that leaves the Umoja up, and for some reason Umoja has just kind of been forgotten about as far as the bans go, and so teams are able to pick her up just a little bit more. Umoja, the first lock-in for Pandamonium. Flip side for Goodnight Nick, they take Fenrir and Osiris.
And this might be part of the reason why Goodnight Nick was okay with sacrificing that Umoja pick towards Pandamonium, because Fenrir, Osiris, I think, both frontlining elements that have pretty viable escapes from that River's Rebuke. Not only that, Fenrir's Brutalize, I think, a pretty decent way to follow through the Riptide, so escape not necessarily as guaranteed here. And I also just like the consistency behind the relic spurning application that a Fenrir and Osiris can introduce. There's a lot of backline dive here as well, and I think it's only going to be further complemented by this Morgan Le Fay. Her ultimate going to be introducing a decent amount of range damage, as well as just the fear and knock-up in general, which is only going to further enhance the beads burning utility out of this Osiris Fenrir as is.
Yeah, Pandemonium recognizing that frontline was the priority of bans out of Goodnight Nick. They'll make sure to draft them up early. Izanami and Raijin will be the first ones taken away here. Meanwhile, it was the Morgan Le Fay as a final lock-in for Goodnight Nick. Instead, they'll start shifting their priorities towards the other ends of the map. Jungle taken away as we see Serket and then a solo lane Cthulhu. Meanwhile, Pandemonium continue to double down on the frontline bans for everybody.
I almost feel like I'm watching a Camelot King set right now with all these support bans that are happening. I mean, Okeanos, this is certainly going to be one heck of a game 1 for him, at least, filling in for that support role there for Emilzy. Because if it was Emilzy, I don't think we would be seeing nearly as many frontline Guardians being stripped away here. But the Khepri, the Terra, he could flex into that Fenrir support. I actually think that might be one of his better options. But then again, Cerberus now being added on to this Pandemonium frontline, and there is a lot, J-Mac, in terms of initiation for Pandemonium to utilize.
Back over to Goodnight Nick for their final selection. Kabrakan locked in, so it very well may have just been a Fenrir all along. They've pulled the rug out from under them and said, ha, joke's on you. We've had our support from the very beginning, but Pandemonium do take a Camazotz and a Cerberus for their final lock-ins going up against these compositions. How does this Cabrakan kind of fit in against these guys?
I am actually hoping to see this Cabrakan in the support role as opposed to in the jungle. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Ice Ice rocking the Cabrakan jungle, just because that is something that we've definitely seen from Ice Ice in the past. It's just my main reasoning being that at least with those tectonic plays out of the Cabrakan, Ho Yi could have a little bit more of a threatening presence off of his ultimate, because you have the slows, you have the lockdown, and I think that when you're able to actually keep members corralled in one place, that's usually where you're going to fare best in the laning phase, especially when you factor in all the separation that Rivers Rebuke's going to bring about out of this Yamoja. And as far as these drafts are concerned initially, though, J-Mac, definitely leaning a little bit more in terms of Pandemonium's favor. I just really like their ability to reinitiate. It's not just one single cycle that they have to depend on in comparison to that from Goodnight Nick.
A lot of area control from Pandemonium as well with those Rivers Rebuke, the Cerberus, Ultimate Stygian Torment. But Goodnight Nick have a good pick comp going for them. We'll see if that can help them out here in this first game. They need a big win up against Pandemonium if they want to shut them out and try and jump up a couple of spots. But we'll have to take it to the casters to see how that all plays out.
In we go to Pandemonium versus Goodnight Nick. And remember, this one important as far as standings goes. Pandemonium at 2-2, Goodnight Nick at 1-3. So we could see Goodnight Nick jump from 5th place on up to 3rd place after this matchup. My name is Dolson. Gore is with me. Doug, bringing us the views for one more set here today, and then 2 more, and then 3 more by the time that this day is done. But Gore, this one over here in Europe, proving to be a fun matchup to watch, or should prove to be a fun matchup to watch, especially as we go into the next round robin.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch what Goodnight Nick has to offer here. Pandemonium has been a team that I think on everyone's mind, especially after Phase 1, has been easily in the top 3 in Europe, although right now I believe they're technically sitting 4th. And so they want this one in order to finalize themselves much higher in the standings. But also, as you had mentioned, I think for Cherio jumping into this team, it's nice to be able to get a couple of wins under your belt and potentially find yourself a little higher up. Whereas Goodnight Nick has been this awkward team of giving everyone trouble, and they did this a lot in Phase 1. I think they did it a lot last year, giving a lot of people trouble, winning some sets where you didn't think they had the upper hand, losing some sets where you thought they should absolutely be in control. And so I want to see if they have the consistency that I want to see out of them.
All right, Pandemonium's got Cherio in the jungle now, so that will help in their efforts moving forward. We've seen a lot more Izanami over in the dual lane, Gore. Ho Yi, though, not so much. And so I think this will be a good match for some data on both of these. Iza's starting to see an increased level of play, though the Harpy gets taken down by Shoxy here. So nice boon there for Pandemonium. But as far as Hunter matchups go, this one's still pretty low on the individual matchup poll.
Yeah, honestly, it's one that in the 1v1, I expect it to go a little more towards Hu Yi. He's just Mark of the Golden Crow, makes it much easier for him to box, and it will help track Izanami if she goes for a dash. Any kind of invisibility will be tracked by that. But at the same time, how often are we seeing these 1v1s, and how often are they popping up? I think it does come down to having the Emoja next to you versus the Fenrir. The Fenrir makes more aggressive.
Yeah, Fenrir is a lot of fun to play in support. You and I were talking in the green room where I know you're support, you love playing support. I'm the type who gets auto-filled into support and ranked when I don't get my roles. And of course, I'm the guy who will queue mid and hunter. I want one of those two. I don't know what that says about me, but
you're the same guy that in like a WoW dungeon finder is like just DPS.
Oh, 100%. It takes me.
I'm gonna sit here for 30 minutes and play one game.
It takes me 30 minutes to. No, but see, that's the key. When you're leveling, you gotta level and then also queue in dungeon finder while you're going to really maximize the XP gain. But when it comes to like looking for raids and stuff later on, yeah, I'm sitting, in my. Wherever I am, whatever town center I'm in, waiting for a raid to pop. But my point being that Fenrir has become one of my favorite supports to play whenever I get that role, because seems like, you have to pick and choose your engagements, especially depending on who's the support and the ADC on the other side. But for me, I just kind of turn the old brain off. I get my runes to a full stack, and I do a little bit of this. You get a free stun, you get some free damage. And it helps tilt that lane in your favor, but then this happens on the other side. You can get turned around, stunned down, locked down, and lots of damage getting returned on Okeanos.
It's in that conversation of, if you aren't playing Yamoja, Fenrir's like I think a really, really solid choice. Otherwise, it should be like that. Shoxy Foxy has enough to really help deal with Okeanos. If you don't get the kill or the setup, I think here on the Fenrir support immediately, then you've got healing on the other side, a stun on the other side, good Riptides that can keep you locked away. A lot of capabilities from a Yemoja that I think realistically slow down the Fenrir, at least enough, right? As of right now, it's stopped him from getting First Blood a couple of times, protected Joshi a few times. We'll have to see if that can sustain itself throughout this game. I think the interesting conversation with any Assassin support, realistically, is just watching their path through the game. Because early on, like you said, hey, I'm going to hold W, I'm going to jump on you, I'm going to make you feel very threatened. At times I'm going to feel very threatened doing so, but I'm going to put the pressure on you one way or another. But when you are transitioning to that late game, positioning, then tankiness starts to come into the equation. How well can you actually be in the front line compared to something like a Yemoja? And are you getting enough bang for your buck?
There's a small window here where there is no Ragnarok, and so that is going to be difficult for Okeanos, but he'll tick over to level 5 here shortly. 3 sets of beads for Pandamonium right now. That is Hawk, Shoxy Foxy, and Joshi. Cherio, of course, has Bat Out of Hell, provides some CC immunity, and then Stygian Torment for Kana should be able to help out. So it's all about Okeanos picking the right target. Unfortunately, it's not Hawk, because Hawk can do this, and the Taiko drums avoid that pickup, but you can't avoid the damage. Ice Ice on the board first with First Blood here. Ice Ice locked in with his own walls, and that's going to give Cherio the kill right back, but Wolfie left untouched, able to return some damage, and Good Night Nick off to a great start. They get 3.
I mean, just what a clean engage, and great walls specifically from Ice Ice. Plus, in a weird twist of events, he not only secured the red buff, picked up the red buff. I would argue it's beneficial for him that he died, because now he gets to go get his speed buff. Right. And so he got to use it while it was necessary, helps his team pick up a lot of those kills. And unfortunately, I think, Hawk gets caught right after his dash goes away. But Cherio as well as Shoxy just kind of stumble into the fight, maybe a little bit too late, realistically, to turn things around. So a good couple of pickups there for Goodnight Nick. That is another thing that this Fenrir, but also this Cabrakan open up in this conversation. A good wall, a good ult from Ice Ice is all it took there to lock things down. Admittedly, you have to wait. Cherio's got to leap. Kana's got to leap. Hawk's got to leap. Guess what? Joshi, he's got to leap. A lot of people are going to be able to get around those walls, but if you wait and catch them afterward, which Ice Ice did there, then it's just going to be clean engages this entire game.
Yep. Kana sends Deathwalker back beneath the Tier 1 tower. Cherio is here on the right side of the map. Ice Ice still pretty squishy here with Chronos Pendant first overall for this Cabrakan. So take some decent damage there from Cherio, who is 1 level up. Stacking into that Transcendence is this Kamazat, and so that'll feel good once it's fully there. Ice Ice, though, and Goodnight Nick in general seem like a team that's pretty happy running some jank out of the jungle, right? Sylvanas, I think,
Sylvanas jungle.
We've seen a couple of times. Ice Ice in particular likes the less than standard picks out of the jungle. But the time has come to start roaming with that Ragnarok, and that is easy for Goodnight Nick. You pick up Hawk, you put him down, and Ice Ice has the rest of the damage on the other end.
And they just moved him right to where they needed him. There wasn't much other than that, but now that the Ragnarok is down, it does make Okeanos' life a little more, I want to just say difficult in general, trying to engage, figuring out where he's going to want to go. He does still have good stuns, but it's not going to be the same easy lockdown he would have otherwise. Might still be able to burn some beads from Joshi, but it's not as big a threat as it otherwise would be.
Yep, Okeanos jumps on Joshi, but Joshi not feeling the need to use beads. Worth mentioning that Hawk did not have beads. And in a split second like that, Okeanos jumps on you, you get stunned, and then immediately into the Ragnarok, you're not going to have time to use your ultimate. If you're Hawk, to get out of that. So that was pretty free and clear there for Goodnight Nick. So if we can continue that for Ice Ice, if you're Goodnight Nick, you're on a great track here at 2-1-2. Looks like a little bit more damage for this Cabrakan afterwards. Okeanos getting jumped on, though. Cherio wants to tower dive. River's Rebuke out from Shoxy Foxy. And Cherio is able to pick up the kill onto Okeanos. And now we've seen both junglers get themselves a relatively quick and easy kill, and Pandamonium needed that one to keep this jungle on track.
I think not just to keep the jungle on track, but just in general for the entire game. Right now we've seen a lot of proactive plays, Streak Up, Wolfie, Ice Ice picking up the kills, but realistically Goodnight Nick making a lot of decisions to put pressure onto Pandamonium, and not a lot of pressure being placed back anywhere. I mean, I guess we got Kana with an ult earlier, putting Deathwalker under the Tier 1, but it's an Osiris. You're not really going to find too much here, just like Wolfie wasn't able to find too much right there. But I think this is the conversation that needs to be had, which is Pandamonium not necessarily stepping on the gas, but just making sure that they keep putting their own notes on this game and not just reacting.
We need some notes in the mid lane, though, because Hawk is 2 levels down from Wolfie right now.
that'd
That
probably be
rotation
where to
into
start.
that early fight paid off huge for Wolfie. 1 kill, 2 assists, 0 deaths. Unfortunately, Hawk died in that fight, didn't have beads, got picked up by Okeanos a moment later. And so this Raijin has been put pretty far behind early on. And you saw how comfortable that made Wolfie just a moment ago. I'm walking up to this Raijin, fearing out, finding the knock-up, finding the damage. There is a world where if Hawk isn't careful, despite having Taiko drums and beads, maybe solo kill potential there for Wolfie. But that's an area of this game, Gore. Now Goodnight Nick can start to play around. Where we're kind of even everywhere else. You got maybe a half-level lead for Shriek up over on the right side of the map. You're still pretty ahead in the gold department. Feel like you got to funnel stuff through Wolfie right now with the Charon's coin and a soul gem there as well. This Morgan Le Fay is going to have serious burst damage.
Oh, yeah, and I think that makes things so much easier because as time goes on, Cabrakan, as much damage as you can do, you do still have Guardian scaling, so you're going to have good output, but look at his kit. He's got 2 forms of stuns, a trimmer, and a giant wall. Like, it just feels like pure setup for a Morgan Le Fay, and we've seen how much damage she can do, so I think Wolfie is going to easily find themselves gradually drifting towards the top, if not at the top, in terms of player damage as these fights continue to go on. And it also makes things a lot easier. Now, thinking about the fact that Ice can create walls, really easy ricochet setup for someone like Streak Up, potentially find some stuns, at least get more damage down. I think the later this game goes, the better it scales for Goodnight Nick.
Yeah, I kind of like that.
And that's in spite of a Raijin and a Yamoja.
Yeah, despite. Right, and that's where you got to look. If you're Pandemonium, we've talked about playing through this Morgan Le Fay for Goodnight Nick. You got to hope that this Raijin then gets to a point where you're able to scale and feel good in the late game. And Izanami as well is going to do plenty of scaling. So there's still something for Pandemonium as the game goes on. But Goodnight Nick feeling comfortable with the pace and the way that things have gone here so far. Anti-heal becomes a topic of conversation in this game, especially for Goodnight Nick with a Kamazotz and a Yamoja, on the other side. Pandemonium already answering that a little bit. Tainted Steel for Joshi. But Goodnight Nick, you got to have some facet of anti-heal, I think, built into your builds here at some point. Maybe not everyone, but someone's got to get it.
And it's weird because it's that bizarre level of anti-heal where, arguably, I should say, you don't necessarily need a Cursed Unk. Like, Shoxy Foxy will have some, not necessarily devastating heals in the middle of a team fight, but annoying heals in the middle of a team fight. But knowing that you have a limited amount of Omi and knowing that each heal that pops out is only going to be so much, the Lotus Crown is maybe actually the more frustrating part of any of that. And you're going to get that despite a Cursed Donk or not. But I don't know that you necessarily need it. Still, if you can't think of anything else to get when you're Okeanos late game, yeah, go for it. I mean, there's no reason not to or to shy away from it or anything like that. But I think it's this interesting level where getting maybe one like Divine Ruin for Wolfie and then Okeanos picking up either a Pestilence or a Contagion, something like that, really does most of the work you would need in the middle of the fight, at least in terms of isolating some of those targets. Whereas a Cursed Onk, especially if you get it upgraded, deals more damage. All of a sudden, Hawk, Cherio, Joshi become very, very easy targets to kill.
I wonder if Ice, if you continue down this damage build path that he's gone, maybe Divine Ruin could slot itself somewhere in there for this Cabrakan. But you got Chronos Pendant into the Polynomicon for Cabrakan here. And so there is plenty of burst in that build there, Gore. I'm just waiting for a moment where one of these carries gets hit by Ice with that stun charged up, Polyproc waiting to happen. Wall, stun, tremors. You're effectively one-shotting carries, I have to imagine.
It's bad because when I think of Cabrakan 1, it really is one of two things. It's either watching someone's entire health bar virtually disappear or watching them awkwardly chase someone as they just right behind them hit the walls, like almost but not quite able to get the stun.
They're pump-faking the autos, right?
And I think that's where, again, a lot of this other setup comes up. All of a sudden, Okeanos, Deathwalker with some slows, Wolfie as well. Like, you don't think of Morgan Le Fay as like a setup god. Realistically, it's self-peel that you should see. But in the right engagement, self-peel can turn into a setup very quickly. And so I think Ice has a lot to play off of in this game as well, which just makes things a little more interesting for him. And I think the Cabrakan jungle at least has a place.
Well, that's smart from Okeanos. Jump in, get the stun onto Hawk, force the beads out. And so now this is the exact situation this Raijin was in earlier on in the game where Goodnight Nick added another kill where the beads were down, Taiko drums were there, but the sudden engage from Okeanos, stun into immediate Ragnarok, was enough to keep Hawk from using that Taiko drums to get out of the Ragnarok. So for the next 135 seconds, Hawk is going to have to play around what could be at any moment a sudden jump in, stun, and Ragnarok from this Fenrir. Joshi will use the dash out, and that's going to turn Okeanos on back. Gold Fury is waiting for Goodnight Nick should they want, and they do want. And so 4 members of Goodnight Nick will round around the Gold Fury here, and nobody from Pandemonium is going to answer. Pyromancer on the right side of the map has gotten started up, but Deathwalker is close by here as well. Lord of the Afterlife ready to go. Will he use it? That's the question. Won't use it. Pandemonium will be able to take down the Pyromancer, I believe. And yes, they will indeed. After a good bit of collapse there, and that's good in a moment like that, Gore. You gotta be able to play the odds, right? There's not a great chance of your team fight around that Gold Fury, so let's take it on over to the Pyro and see if we can get some gold.
And I always like those trades because at the end of the day, you're not losing as much as you could. I mean, it's still not necessarily a favorable trade, and as you stack them up, like if you make that trade, let's say 3 times in a row, you're now at a definite deficit and you're going to be feeling it. But first on, like, you're already, like, you're getting at least a guaranteed objective. You're staying proactive on the map, something I wanted to see out of them. And you're keeping the lead just manageable enough that as you start to translate into those team fight phases, you really will start testing exactly how well Goodnight Nick is going to be able to take an advantage and turn it.
And this is, kind of an intriguing now pace here in this game, Gore, where really feels like one side was pushing a lot of the pace early on. Things have kind of slowed down from that point on. And so, we've talked about the scaling. On one side, you're a little bit ahead. On the other side, though, you've got a Raijin, an Izanami, Yamoja. So there is some good late-game scaling, though, on the other side. We'll see how that scaling works out. Appreciate everyone with the patience as we get back into game number 1 here. And it's Pandemonium that are down, Gore. Goodnight Nick have let off the gas pedal just a little bit, but we're going to refuel that car and tower dive on the left side here. Joshi, no chance, but maybe a chance for Pandemonium to answer back.
I mean, Cherio is just going to sustain here, but look at Hawk and Shoxy. They're trying to get back into the fight.
They are. River's Rebuke. Ice will walk through the wall. Oh, the blink in and the stun and the damage onto Cherio. Goodbye, Kamazotz. Will Taiko Drums make Ice pay? It sure looks like it. And Hawk at least able to get on the board, but that sudden turnaround damage was massive.
Kana's just waiting. Kana has blink. And
do it!
Kana, I think, is going to get aggressive here.
Maybe could blink in. Might not need it. Will blink in. Hou-Yi, that streak up in the air. Does not have ultimate.
My God.
Stygian Torment will feed the second kill on over to Hawk. And streak up never really came down. From the leap, came back down. Stygian Torment brought him right back up. And Hawk sent him onto the grave. And that is massive for the mid lane of Pandemonium because there was about a 2-level gap. Still is 2 levels, but the gold starting to shrink down a little bit as Hawk able to pick up a couple.
That maybe is arguably the most important, about 1,000 gold separating the 2 mid laners, which is enough for at least the tier 2, or now for Wolfie finishing off an entire Spear of Desolation versus what Pandemonium is going to be able to bring. But Raijin, I mean, even down, you saw how much damage he just did? Like, that is exactly why this pick has been so high up on the tier list lately. And outside of your Tiamat's, your Morgan the Phase, although she's kind of fallen off more recently, he's arguably number 2, number 3 in that conversation. And I think we're going to see a lot more of his presence mattering throughout this. If Hawk can stabilize 2-2, you didn't have a very good start to the game, but now you're going to be able to get your feet back under you and kind of set things up. I think we're in for a treat.
Okeanos has to use the Ragnarok. If that bit of damage from Cherio had connected, we might have gone tower diving there. Bat Out of Hell was ready to go. It's important for Cherio now with the fully stacked Transcendence. A few kills under his belt to kind of keep pace with Ice on the other side. We've seen it, though, a couple of times here, Gore, where it's kind of that give and take when you play something like this Cabrakan, where you're going to blink in, you're going to do a lot of damage, but that's kind of it, right? You might sacrifice yourself, and so that's going to be a fun, I think, dynamic to follow along with this game for Ice, where the decision-making between jumping in, dying, but maybe you got a priority target with you. We'll have to see what types of trades Ice is willing to take here. Mid lane tier 1 tower goes down a little bit ago, Gore, and that's actually pretty impactful here 17 minutes in. That kind of archway from purple onto blue buff on the Pandemonium side of the map now a bit more open.
We've already seen Goodnight Nick going for red buff invades as well, so Now you have even less of a safe haven if you're Pandamonium trying to take that fight, which to me means Goodnight Nick should start pressuring it whenever they get the opportunity. The problem is once you get this late in, it's difficult to find that opportunity without it turning into like either a drastic situation for you or a drastic situation for the other team. Typically, I'm used to seeing it with the Fire Giant buff around your belts, you get aggressive, you know you're going to be knocking down some towers. Right now, you take one step too far, and everything could fall apart, although Okeanos has been sitting here for a while now.
Looking for Joshi, who will dash away. Fury is
I like
not
the
back up.
commitment.
Yeah, I like it, right? Joshi will dash away, though, keep himself on the map. Beads were ready to go for the Izanami. Everyone on Pandemonium's got beads now. So, the conversation around CC immune ultimates, absolutely one worth having, but there's also now 5 sets of beads, and so that's going to make target selection difficult maybe for Okeanos as the rest of this game goes on. But it's been a great start for this Fenrir. 6 kills, all 6 of them affected by Fenrir. And now the Pridwin picked up, the target selection might not get easier, but the comfortability with going in with that Ragnarok might be because of the shielding.
Yeah, I think that's your capability of I can jump in, I can ult, I can theoretically walk out still alive is maybe the biggest deal when you're something like a Fenrir. And that's the conversation I was having earlier, which is when you're up against someone like Shoxy Foxy on this Yemoja, are you going to feel as confident in the late game? That's the downsides of having an assassin over there in the support role. But your damage is what makes up for it. You're going to be able to dish out a little bit more, even though you can't take as much, knowing that you're going to then set up your team for success. And right now, Okeanos, I actually really like this build for survivability when jumping into the backline.
Wow, a few Spirit Robes picked up as well. One for Kana, one for Shoxy Foxy. It's a Lord of the Afterlife out from Deathwalker, but traded with Stygian Torment there for Kana. So kind of engage mitigated for both teams here. One for Pandemonium, one ultimate down. That's the leap in, of course, for Deathwalker with that Lord of the Afterlife. Pyromancer is up. Fury is also up as well. And I think, Gore, once we start to see the Soul Laner's position over the next minute or two, we'll get a pretty good idea of which teams are feeling comfortable where. But here's the thing. We kind of quieted down, right? We got a whole bunch of kills early, a couple kills here and there since then, a lot of them on the left side of the map. Goodnight Nick has built this up to a 6,000 gold lead where it was like 2,000 earlier on, despite not necessarily being on the gas pedal as far as kills go.
Yeah, I mean, really, a couple of objectives, a couple of towers, and just good farm at this point has really grown their lead, like you said, to a 7,000 now since they get the Pyromancer. And that's where a lot of these differences are being made. I mean, you had highlighted it. It's 2 levels still in mid, 1 level there for the carries and the jungle where things are just starting to get out of hand. And that makes things easier. Ice Ice did just use his ult, so maybe not going to be seeing any big engages, but Goodnight Nick have a distinct advantage if they jump into a fight sometime soon, and Okeanos seems to recognize that.
Yeah, Cherio will leap away, though. And so there is some anti-heal, but it's Cherio who picks it up. It's the Brawler's beat stick there for this Camazotz. Ice Ice building into a little bit more damage after the first 3 items in that build are completed. So there's going to be no Fury trading out for Pyromancer here for Pandemonium because Pyro goes over to Goodnight Nick. And now being looked at is the Primo Fury. We're going to see the Soul Laners involved in a 5v5 for the first time this game. Everyone outside of Okeanos, actually Okeanos just used his ultimate a moment ago. So now that Ragnarok for pulling in one of those targets won't be here. Actually don't even know where he used it, to be honest. Maybe he was looking for a target on it.
Oh yeah, he was trying to grab, it was either Cherio or Hawk, but didn't close the gap fast enough. Yeah, it didn't close the gap fast enough. And them all 5 having beads is actually wonderful for this fight.
Mentioned a cursed Ankh, and that is there for Okeanos. So we'll see if the leap in and Ankh is enough to lessen that healing. Goodnight Nick takes down the Primo Fury. Pandemonium was close by. You attempt to steal there, but they're not comfortable enough right now, Gore, to try to fight.
No, I was wondering if they were going to even bother trying to ult. I mean, you've got River's Rebuke, you've still got the Taiko drums. It felt like a great spot to try and box people in on Goodnight Nick and just lock them down. Even if you don't steal the Fury, get a couple of kills out of it. But no, they just let that one flow by. And that's where things get a little more dangerous, I think, for Pandemonium. Because you're looking at it, you just look at the kills, quick glance to the top. It seems like everything is pretty fine and dandy overall. But like you had mentioned earlier, and it bears worth repeating now because they've got a Pyromancer and a Fury since then, the gold lead is just so heavily in favor of Goodnight Nick that you really have to start buckling down And yeah, it's going to be, I mean, at this point, for Pandemonium, no matter what, it's going to be an uncomfortable fight.
Yeah.
They're just so far ahead that you're going to have to figure out where to make that stand. But I will say, it is worthwhile not making that stand around a Fury if you can then fight around a Fire Giant and think yourself successful. And with their ults, I think anything's possible.
Right, we talk about our Goodnight Nick slowing down. I mean, not necessarily. They're doing the objectives, and Pandemonium's just choosing not to fight over them. And it looks like
they're continuing that.
They're going to continue that mindset here. Yeah, I don't know.
So
Gore.
remember that thing I just said about picking your fight?
See, I mean, maybe there's a world where that gets snuck away. I mean, there's not great ward coverage, if any at all, from Pandemonium. I imagine a lot of it got cleared out, but on the back side of that Fire Giant pit, there's no way Pandemonium would have known that Goodnight Nick were in there. But, I mean, look at it. So now a Pyromancer, a Fury, and a Fire Giant have all gone down to Goodnight Nick. And we haven't seen Pandemonium in range for any of them except Shoxy Foxy trying to steal away the Fury.
Yeah, so this is where that checklist normally comes in handy, where you look down and you go, oh, well, they didn't have X Relic or X ult. Like, there's a good reason to not be there. They had every Relic, every ult, everything in their arsenal available for Pandemonium. And so you have to think that, at least for them, getting that Tier 2 was maybe more worthwhile. They did open a Phoenix, so I will say they've given themselves a late-game win state.
It's the only open Phoenix.
4 towers that are still available. I mean, the Titan on Goodnight Nick's side is still going to be tanky. Maybe not so tanky that it thwarts you if you get a full reverse sweep against this team right now. But it definitely isn't making your life any easier, and you've only managed to push up a little bit of this gold lead. It's all going to end up traversing right back when Goodnight Nick clear out the remaining towers.
Left side, Phoenix is open for Goodnight Nick, and we are going sieging. Hawk jumped on in the back. Ragnarok on Nakana, who immediately uses the beads, so Okeanos gets 1 set of beads with his jump on in. 4 sets of beads still there for Pandemonium. 1 ult down, that's the Taiko drum, so a set of beads as well as Taiko drums down for Pandemonium. Goodnight Nick have a great second wind opportunity in this fight. Ice blinks into the back. Hawk uses his beads finally. Walls go up to keep Shoxy Foxy right where he is. Sun's breaking down from Shriek Up, and a lot of damage being put back into Goodnight Nick, and Joshi has waited a long time to get his first kill, but it's an impactful one. Suddenly this Phoenix Siege sent right back.
And now the damage is starting to pour out. They get rid of Kana, but they lose so much in the process.
Wow, Joshi is absolutely swinging right now. Left side Phoenix does go down, so Goodnight Nick gets something, but they lose 2 members of their team in the meantime. They have to go back, Goran. So there's 1 minute and 45 seconds left on this Fire Giant buff. Of course, you'd like that to continue if you're Goodnight Nick. I'm not sure it can. You're going to lose another 30 seconds on these respawns, and Pandemonium may have done enough to only lose 1 Phoenix.
Yeah, honestly, I think your best case scenario if you're Goodnight Nick is to get 1 more Tier 2 tower, get a little bit more gold in your pocket, but there's a Pyromancer available. Your jungle buffs are up. Like you said, you're still waiting another 20 seconds now before Wolfie gets there. Probably just taking it easy for a little while. You still have a minute to work with after all that, so there's probably just enough time to try and squeak forward and steal away a Tier 2. With Fire Giant, you keep Streak Up alive. I think that's very easily in the conversation, plus it would swing gold even more in your favor. But I think it goes to show, once again, Pandemonium, when they show up to the fights, are really going to put up a good show. It is just making sure they do it consistently that's been the problem so far.
And I guess that answers a question that we had earlier on, where why aren't Pandemonium showing up to the Pyro? Why aren't they showing up to the Fury? Why aren't they showing up to the FG? Maybe they're realizing that if we show up to the Fire Giant and we lose a fight there, I guess really what they're doing is hedging their bets that we have a better chance at defending our Phoenix
better, yeah,
versus trying to step up toe-to-toe underneath an FG. And I guess it worked out here. Everyone on Pandemonium outside of the support has reached level 20, and so the XP gaps have all closed up. Builds somewhat similar, a little bit behind in a build here or there. Actives all in a pretty similar spot here, Gore. And so when FG falls off here, especially if Pandemonium are able to get this Primal Fury quietly, which it looks like they will, might be the most even fight of the game, despite that left side Phoenix being down.
It's this really awkward position where Pandemonium actually may be better off. They did lose that Phoenix, you highlighted it, so they're, no matter what, blank state worse than they were before, but gold-wise, pretty much in the exact same spot as they were last time, maybe even a little bit better than the last Fire Giant fight. So they do keep some stuff pulled back in their favor and maybe keep this game a little more, as you had said, in control, or at least somewhat even in comparison to what it could be. They've got the left side minions pushed up a decent amount. They probably push one more wave, and it looks like Hawk is going to try to do that. Then you need to reset for the Fire Giant. And this is where it becomes the end-all be-all. With that Phoenix already knocked down and your Titan exposed, I think I understand you just showcase that you have a really good defense. But at the same time, if Goodnight Nick get this, all it takes is just one good fight for him. Not even a great fight. They just kill off Hawk and Joshi. All of a sudden, they can run it right into the Titan room.
Well, Hawk is not going to be here, at least immediately. Hawk is on the left side of the map dealing with the Fire Minions, and maybe Pandamonium, they have enough confidence after the way that their first Phoenix defense went, that they're okay to run this one back. There's 2 minutes, 10 seconds until this one turns enhanced. I don't think that's something Goodnight Nick are going to sit around and wait around for, so it's going to be the same buffed up version of Goodnight Nick that you're defending against. And that looks like the answer, because look, the Phoenix is going to respawn here shortly. I imagine that's where Goodnight Nick goes. They take down the FG. You got a weakened Phoenix on left. Maybe we look there. But Pandamonium making a calculated decision to defend the base instead of defend the FG.
Admittedly, once that Phoenix respawns, which should be in the next few seconds, outside of this tier 2, now that that's fallen, the statement I was going to say is false. But the map state is roughly equal. Once that Phoenix is back up, you've got 2 tier 1s now left for Goodnight Nick, or 2 tier 2s, I should say, and then 1 tier 2 on the side of Pandamonium still standing. So this Phoenix is a very important siege.
Lots of damage finds its way into Joshi, and it's Ice who blinks into the back. Shoxy Foxy has to answer with the Emoja ultimate, as Kana is left alone with Goodnight Nick as well, but the front line is just withstanding so much here. Now Hawk back from base, sends out the Taiko drums, but it's not in time. Shoxy Foxy, the first casualty of this fight. Streak Up makes it 2, and Goodnight Nick have caught fire here. Streak Up with the double. Only 2 members of Pandamonium left alive.
And this Phoenix should just get knocked down. Deathwalker has the teleport available. I was like, why are you backing, man? They need you. But he's going to be able to get right back into this fight.
Yeah.
Full health, full mana. This is going to be what should be an ending fight, ultimately, for Goodnight Nick.
We got to wait for it, though, Gore. We don't get to watch it right now. It just took a minute. It took a minute to get there.
Yeah.
But Pandamonium, that was such a separated fight. It was effectively the front line sitting there just getting whittled on down. Hawk was dealing with minions on left, backed, came back into the fight. Taiko drums were a little bit late. And so that was a fantastic fight to get this game close to being over for Goodnight Nick.
And honestly, Goodnight Nick are in a position, it's a 2v5. Everybody feels healed up, or at least looked healed up, ready to barrel down. The right side Phoenix is gone. Left side Phoenix is weakened. I don't think there's really any reason to diddle-doddle. No. Just run into the Titan and go and get some kills.
I like that one, Glenn. This is about as over as it can be without the Titan being dead at the moment, because Cherio does not have his ultimate. There's no Taiko drums for Hawk either.
Nope.
You're going to have to just get it done with your good old-fashioned abilities here in this one. And Goodnight Nick, I think you open yourself up to this potential.
Yeah.
Not that it was their choice, but when the game really slows down, there's an opportunity for Pandamonium to get back in. But quickly dashed to the rocks were those hopes for Pandamonium. All 5 members of Goodnight Nick with FG, and all 5 barrel into the Titan room. Big silence is there from Cherio, but it's not going to connect. Ice is going to get that kill, and then a bit of a block off onto Hawk as Goodnight Nick finalized game 1.
Yeah, no need to dawdle. They knew exactly what they had. They knew
2 for
exactly
2
what
on
they needed to
diddle-doddling.
do. And they just walked in and did it. They just won the game the way that they should have.
Yep.
I think it's really impressive, though, to watch the way they played that, because early on, it felt like there was a lot of back and forth between the two teams. Yep. And you had highlighted it. It had slipped under the radar, I think, of me and of Pandamonium, where it's just, after a while, they just kind of had 6,000 gold up. Like, they went Gold Fury for Pyromancer, and then 3 minutes later, they had a 6,000 gold lead. They didn't take any neutral objectives in the process. They weren't finding a ton of kills. They just happened to really escalate their farm game. They were getting better minion waves. They were doing better in their jungle camps, stripping away what Pandamonium had as well. It just made it difficult for them to stay alive in it.
Yeah, there was that one, Pyro to Fury to Fire Giant cycle where Pandamonium were just experiencing Smite. They were logged into the game. They were saying, look, we got a chance under the Phoenix defense, but that's about it. And credit to Pandamonium, they looked okay under that first Phoenix defense.
Yeah.
Didn't really look great under any of the Phoenix defenses later on in that game. Goodnight Nick. They'll take game number 1 here. It's time for Pandamonium to bounce back. Can they do it in game 2? Stick around to find out.
I gave up dabbing for Lynn.
Cool. No more dabbing for final. He looked at me and said, I'm going to be on that stage next year. I'm going to become a world champion.
Well, welcome back here to the Smite Challenger Circuit. Good night, Nick. Getting a nice little win over Pandamonium in game number 1. But as you saw highlighted by the video coming in, by the way, that was a pretty sick video. It's the first time I've seen it. Smite Pro League playoffs tomorrow through Sunday. The 6 top teams of the SPL will be competing for their chance at the top of the prize pool for it. We're going to see so many big and amazing game. Starts out huge with the Dragons versus the Titans for one of our first one for it. You're not going to want to miss out on the SPL playoffs. Tuning in tomorrow starting at 1 p.m. is when those games will kick off. But that's for tomorrow. That's in the future. We're here for the here and now. Good night, Nick, with their win over Pandamonium in game number 1. J-Mac and Taco joining me here to break down the remainder of that set. And it looked like, from what I could see, Pandamonium just had no answer to this Cabrakan jungle.
The Pandemonium's main issue, I think, kind of stemmed a little bit in that early game surrounding the red buff. In fact, J-Mac, because it seemed as though Pandemonium, they had the right idea. They were looking for some buff pressure, but unfortunately, things just went and collapsed right underneath them. I think that Streak Up had a fantastic rotation, and when you combine that alongside of Ice and the application of the Cabrakan walls, the lockdown, that was something that we talked about during that initial drafting phase when we saw the Cabrakan come out, and I wouldn't call it skepticism as much as it was the execution needed to be on point here from Goodnight Nick, and I think that they accomplished exactly that. They made so much space for Streak Up. He was basically able to do whatever he wanted for the backline in terms of recasting.
Yeah, just kind of sitting there, not a single person really able to discomfort this Hunter, even picking up a double kill in that last Phoenix Siege. And the first blood, at one point I turned around, it was 0-0. I'm like, all right, cool, it's all going nice and steady, center to you. And then all of a sudden I look up and it's a 3-1 swing in favor of Goodnight Nick out of nowhere. It's making an explosive play over at that red buff to get that first blood. Ice and Streak Up, kind of the two benefactors for this team, able to lead them to that Game 1 win.
I was also definitely impressed with Okeanos. I mean, he had some pretty big shoes to fill stepping in here for a Millsy, who unfortunately is not available due to being away currently. But again, I can understand why a Millsy would feel confident in the rest of his team here, because Okeanos, he did exactly what he needed to do. I mean, 10 assists was a part of, I think, just about every kill aside from one, and that alone, I think, is kind of the main storyline here, really, J-Matt, because those objective gameplays especially, I think the Pandemonium might have just felt as though this one kind of just snowballed a little bit too far out of their favor, but even with that being in mind, or even if that's the case, you have to show some sort of sign of life around those objectives to allow everything in the game to go away for free and then expect to try and withhold on a Phoenix defense. By then, the goal disparity is so heavy, it just gets tough to combat that itemization disadvantage.
And the one really difficult thing that Pandemonium has coming into game number 2 for picks and bans is you can't really ban this team out in a composition that they pulled off last time around. Sure, you can take some of the things like Fenrir away, but outside of that, they went a little bit kind of off the chain and kind of off kilter for some of their picks here. It's a really difficult one for you to just outright ban through, so more so for Pandemonium as we come into game number 2, need to really start drafting some more of their strengths.
Interesting to see Pandemonium, though, actually default to that second pick position. Maybe they feel as though that initial response of the Fenrir just did not really seem to bode too well for the likes of Pandemonium. It definitely stemmed out of the fact that they clearly thought that Fenrir was intended elsewhere, because you don't ban 4 Guardians away if you really believe that Fenrir is going to be flexed into the support role. So Pandemonium may be wanting to force a little bit more to be revealed from Goodnight Nick before anything else, and it is going to be that Fenrir response right away, and I like this because it's flexible, and we've already seen it in the hands of Okeanos one time before, so Pandemonium will have to decide from here whether they want to keep that frontline focus up or if they want to look elsewhere.
And you see that they make that adjustment in their first few bans. Instead of doing this triple frontline double Guardian ban, instead they go with the Osiris, which was a problem from them from Deathwalker. They take the Odin away just because you got to ban Odin at this point. There's no reason not to. He's such a strong solo laner, has a lot of flexibility between multiple roles to play, and the Tiamat because, well, it's Tiamat. So just going with more safe bans for Goodnight Nick. They're going for more targeted stuff. Raijin, Artemis, taking away a top hunter, and a Soul, directly targeted at Hawk. But meanwhile, as the first picks come through, Fenrir and Bologna, Sobek, Izanami, and then a Rom for the third selection for Goodnight Nick.
Fairly aggressive comp so far, though, from Goodnight Nick, especially with that Bologna. I like the addition of the Eagles rally. It introduces, again, just that Burner Bees application, which is going to be nice for whoever winds up on this Fenrir pick. Again, not totally convinced that it's for Okeanos, but even if it is, might have some more difficulties now with that Hell Cleanse being introduced. Hell has been such a popular ban over the past couple of weeks. And I think mages in general right now, particularly healers, they certainly pose a pretty big issue, and especially for the likes of Goodnight Nip, because what they're lacking right now, J-Mac, is largely just the burst damage, and you need a way to try and suppress this hell early on.
And there's still some flexibility with this hell. It could go mid, it could go solo, and you don't really know until, well, the rest of the draft is kind of picked out here. Kabrakan and Hamazotz will be the first gods banned away by Pandamonium in second phase, making sure to take Ice away from Kabrakan. That gave them so much trouble in game number 1. Meanwhile, Goodnight Nick will take away Circuit and Erlong Shen, taking a couple shots in the jungle, and a little bit with support with that Circuit, though more often than not we have been seeing it running along the jungle. Now allow for Morgan Le Fay to stay open, so Goodnight Nick will, or Pandamonium will make sure that they can at least lock in their mid laner now, so we do know that this hell is going to be going over to the solo lane.
Kind of interesting that Goodnight Nick would opt to ban away the Circuit, given the fact that they knew Pandamonium have this healer, and with that Morgan Le Fay not being locked in, I'm assuming that this is going to be held in the solo lane role. That's where we've been primarily seeing here in the Smite Pro League at least, and you have to imagine that as far as competitive is concerned, there's going to be some similarities here, even in the SCC, but Merlin has a lot of tank shred capability, although there's not really a whole lot of tanks here for Pandamonium. This is largely just a run it down composition in its finest, and I think that Loki kind of just the cherry on top in terms of being able to take out anyone at a low HP that is trying to get away.
It's a good little pun, even if you didn't intend it there. I'm not sure if you meant it for it, but Merlin going to be a great Divine Ruin applicator here for Goodnight Nick, so maybe that's part of the reason that we see it go on the way of Goodnight Nick. But Pandamonium, they got a scary comp with this hell. You're going to need something to shut it down. We'll see if Goodnight Nick can do so, or is Pandamonium going to bring us to a Game 3? We'll have to find out with the casters.
Pandamonium would sure like this one to go 3, and they've gotten themselves a great draft to do so. Still, Dolson, Gore, and Doug here on game number 2 between Pandamonium and Goodnight Nick. There's a lot of damage, Gore, on one side of the screen here. Not that there's not a lot of damage on the left, but Pandamonium, they've got a run it at you type comp.
They've got a really, really good control composition, too. I mean, like, just looking at Sobek in general, which admittedly might be the only one that really plays into the hand of that I just said, control, that is going to be available for them. But Pandamonium, with a Sobek, is going to be able to pluck a ton of people and make them feel awkward. I mean, Deathwalker gets plucked, has to ult away. Ice, Wolfie have jumps. Streak Up has a roll, but nowhere near, I think, the same amount of comfort that they would like otherwise. And you can see where I think a lot of that pressure is going to be. Deathwalker doesn't have to worry about it too much early on because Sobek's on the other side of the map, but everybody else has some beads, I think, prepared for that pressure that just Shoxy's going to bring, let alone the damage follow-up that Hawk will have, as well as the fact that Cherio last year was one of the first ones, I believe, to pull out the Loki when he had gotten his rework, and has since then been one of the few who has looked fantastic at Loki, and I think this is a good pick for Pandamonium in the jungle to potentially showcase what they have.
High expectations for Cherio here in this game. Great start here to the duo lane for Okeanos and Streak Up. They reach level 2 before Joshi and Shoxy Foxy, so let's push that advantage just a little bit. Wolfie gets slowed, but then it's a jump in from Ice onto Cherio, who has to use the beads. Brutalize, canceled on out by Ice there. So both junglers taken a bit low, but Cherio a bit worse for wear. Action continues on the right of the map as Okeanos has to rip Tide away. And this lane can be threatening, really on either end, I guess. Kind of similar dynamic, Gore, to what we saw with the Fenrir versus the Emoji. You got to be similarly careful here if you're the Sobek. Another Brutalize connects onto Hawk. Is the last bit of damage there? No, it's not. And the Morgan Le Fay lives on. Wolfie has a little bit of mana. Cherio's here to cover as well, but I think you're too low at level 3 and 2 to go tower diving into the tier 1.
And I gotta give credit to Ice and Wolfie because that is 2 games in a row so far where Hawk just hasn't been able to live at the very beginning.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
he does live, he doesn't die, but they just don't let him have any purchase in this lane. And that's good play from Goodnight Nick. I think that they're doing a great job in terms of controlling it. But I'm wondering where it starts to tamper off, just because you have to think of Merlin maybe not as the controlling nature that we had last game.
Great blink pluck from Shoxy Foxy. Does Joshi have the range? No, is the answer, as Okeanos makes beneath the tier 1 tower. I like these combos of kind of hyper-aggressive supports with the Izanami. The ability to chase down, even if there's a minion wave there, and hit for some damage on the auto attacks for Izanami. just by nature of how those auto attacks work, I think is a pretty fun combo to watch. And look at the pressure that they've already gotten on Pandemonium's side of the map here in the dual lane, or Goodnight Nick's side of the map. Purple buff invade, but it's brutalize and stun onto Shoxy Foxy. I'm not sure that he knew the jungler was going to be here. Dash right through the Riptide, but Leap is there, and Ice has first blood.
I mean, they get the purple buff, so win some, lose some. First blood definitely way better to be picked up there from Ice, because guess what now they can do is put the pressure onto Joshy.
Brutal. Joshy's not going to get his own purple buff unless he steals it away. Riptide onto Joshy, but the dash away will not only use the last bit of mana, but the last chance of getting your own purple buff if you're Pandemonium. So first blood plus an even trade in the purple buff department is a great start for the left side of the map of Goodnight Nick.
Not as even as it could be. Joshy got his two small
you're right.
minions by the purple.
You're right, Gore.
So he is ever so slightly ahead, but he's losing all of that off in farm in this wave right here. So it's not necessarily going to balance out. Yeah, much better for Goodnight Nick. There's no way to really gloss over that. Pandemonium, I like where their mind is at. It's just the execution, and unfortunately, Ice had a stronger rotation.
Cherio's behind Wolfie here, and there's a lot of damage from Hawk. Cherio hits level 5 and immediately uses the ult to close that gap. Oh, and the last bit of damage is there. Wolfie, with the assistance of the tower, will clean up after the double kill from Cherio. But the timing on that is perfect. Veteran player mindset there from Cherio, knowing the moment you hit level 5, we're leveling up that ult and we're getting in.
And to be able to collapse immediately on the Ice had more mana, Ice had more escapability in that circumstance, and so you make sure you lock down the target that needs to go down first. And then you can clean up Wolfie. Unfortunately dying in the process, I think maybe hoping the tower either A, wouldn't do as much damage, or B, just didn't care. And honestly, I'd say B is just fine because you get 2 kills, and you set not only even up for the kills in the game, but you technically now are ahead in the jungle, so Cherio is in a good position to continue being a little more proactive. And this is what I want to see out of his Loki play. Use your ult, be aggressive, and kind of create some space for your team, or close the gap to find those kills. Until Joshy gets around, you're going to be one of the main sources of damage.
These next few minutes, I think, are going to be pretty big for Cherio as well. You get a double kill in the mid lane. Looks like you're going Transcendence again. First item out of the jungle. You don't have beads. Deathwalker uses teleport, or has teleport here. Wolfie somewhat susceptible to ganks, as Flicker doesn't separate you all that much. Ice walking towards Hawk here, uses the beads, but it's early, and the Ragnarok is there, and it's an easy rotation in from Wolfie to get the kill on the Pandemonium mid lane. A River's Rebuke is great here on the Shoxy Foxy as well. Watch out though, Cherio off to the right could close this gap.
And Shoxy Foxy's going to pop out of the ult, but he's just getting burned.
Oh, great silence from Joshy and the turnaround kill. One more snipe on the Shoxy and it won't connect. In the meantime, Ice brutalizes Cherio, and Goodnight Nick able to find a few kills here on the left side of the map. A double kill now for the other jungler.
I mean, just well played. Ice multiple times in that fight looks good. The patience while he's in the Ragnarok to not necessarily chomp down on someone who has used their beads, and then again the patience to make sure that they're not just chasing kills, again, willy-nilly, not just diving a tier 2 for the sake of it. You are patiently approaching them. Helps turn that back in their favor. Cherio has a great turnaround as well to be able to come in and find such a massive ult, but ultimately Pandemonium just aren't able to keep up with that. That was really, really well-timed. Hawk unfortunately met like the merits of a pre-beads. Sometimes they're great, and when you pre-bead something and then it works out,
it, right?
It really
until
is
you got
fine.
picked up.
But yeah, for some ults, and I think Fenrir ult might be one of them, sometimes it's okay if you get grabbed.
Cherio makes his way to the right as Kana has been ulted by Deathwalker here. Still plenty of damage out of this Loki. Some sustain from the hell as well, and it's going to be needed here as Ice jumps in, and it's another brutalized kill. Are we going to dive this tower? Might be difficult. Cherio very close to having that ult back up. Instead, maybe it's just a blue buff invade, but Ice has stuck around. Cherio considering going back in, but there's a fight over the red buff on the left side of the map as Shoxy Foxy will use the ultimate, but Streak Up's got the last auto attack. Get the kill. This is a fast-paced EU game. Joshy drops his ult onto Okeanos as well. Neither team giving up an inch.
And you know what? Shoxy got the red buff. So I guess at the end of the day, well, no, the kills still read 7-3, so not necessarily helpful for Pandemonium. But they're stripping away what could otherwise be a pretty heavy-handed, well, just nature of fight from Goodnight Nick.
God.
Granted, I say that you get to steal a red buff away and get another kill. I don't know. Ice seems to be just on point. This Fenrir is running away with this game.
Ice level 9 at 6 and 1.
Yeah.
Feels like no target is a bad target right now if you're the jungler for Goodnight Nick, but Pandamonium, they've got a jungler who's doing well as well. 3, 2, and 1, not quite 6 kills, but 3 and getting closer to stacking up that Transcendence is always going to be a good thing here. It's a war in the jungle here, Gore. 6 for one, 3 for the other. Who's going to carry harder between Ice and Cherio?
Right now, Ice hands down. We'll see if he can continue that pace. The problem is going to be whether or not they can group up the same way that we've been seeing out of Pandamonium. That's a good River's Rebuke, though.
Cherio has his ult,
Good
but that
ult.
puts him right into Ragnarok range, and Ice has his 7th. Now under the Tier 1 tower, Kana's rotated in. No kills being given up entirely for free in the last couple of minutes. And Gore, this is one of the faster-paced EU games, admittedly, that we've seen here in a little while. Teams very patient and calculated in EU. And it seems like caution is sort of being thrown to the wind in game number 2. Pandamonium find themselves a little bit behind, about 2,000 gold in the hole. And Goodnight Nick, if they can continue playing around this jungler, or rather if the jungler can continue bringing the fight to the rest of the map, Goodnight Nick will be in a pretty comfortable position. But we've seen flashes of good from Cherio here as well. And so the Fenrir versus Loki matchup should be a lot of fun to watch. Greater Scorpion actually gets stolen away by Deathwalker, so another small advantage to Goodnight Nick.
And it's those little advantages that really are what's stacking up for them. Kills, I mean, they are meaning a lot in this game, a lot more than you'd expect. 14 in 9 minutes, like you said, for Europe is high-paced action. But it's more to me that Pandamonium is just being a lot more proactive. I had said it at the beginning of last game, but you had mentioned, and we kind of saw it in action, where there was a Pyromancer into a Fury, into a Fire Giant, where Pandamonium just were in the lobby. They weren't necessarily fighting anybody. They weren't making a presence really known around Goodnight Nick. I think a little bit of a showcase from Shoxy Foxy that at the time on the Emoja showed around a Fury, but otherwise just kind of let everything happen in the map. This time around, they're getting a lot more aggressive. They're going for jungle invades, and some of them have paid off, some of them haven't, but I like to see the fact that they are trying to drive the pace of the game.
Look at this grouping from Goodnight Nick. All 4 members, soon to be 5, as Deathwalker is back in base, coming to the left side of the map. It's going to be a 5v5. Cherio looking for Okeanos, but instead it's Shriek up. But Shoxy Foxy has to use Lurking in the Waters. Kana has taken a whole lot of damage, and Ice puts him in the dirt. Joshi able to answer back with a kill of his own, though, and so Pandamonium able to swing back into this fight. Cherio stealthing on out behind Goodnight Nick, but that has opened things up for Deathwalker and opened things up for Ice, who has his 2nd.
And realistically, I don't think anyone else should die, although this Tier 1 on left is maybe going to be in jeopardy. And if Hawk and Joshi stay too long, they're going to end up falling.
Hawk does not have beads and does not have a chance, and now Streak Up's got 2 in this game. And that's a big swing here 10 minutes into this game. Swinging in the same direction that we've already been swinging. Goodnight Nick apparently can do no wrong. Deathwalker's gone for an interesting build here, Gore, and that's the first kind of flash that we've seen from this Bologna. Had Shogun's Kusari early, then into the Ikavale on Bologna after that.
Bologna likes to hit. She likes to hit fast and hard. And so ultimately, I expect Deathwalker maybe not to continue this build, but like something that is bruisery, right? Falling right into the in-between. What is it? Berserkers is usually a really good slot right here.
Yep.
And it looks like that's probably where he's going to end up going. But this is just good shouts all around from Pandamonium. The downside is, or I should say Goodnight Nick, the downside is that Pandamonium have something that is favorable for them, and that is a Hell that does transition well into late game. That's
true.
Right now, realistically, is what I'm looking at as number 1. Cherio and Hawk are going to have to play catch-up similar to what they did last game around. I think Josh is in the same boat, although doing a much better job of it right now. It is Kana that is the wild card to me, because Bologna is solid. Bologna is great in team fight, and Bologna has a 2-level lead right now. But Hell is Hell. At the end of the day, she has a lot of healing and brings a lot to the late game that could help Pandamonium at least level things out. Unless Goodnight Nick really start to run rampant, and admittedly they have been. Next Gold Fury, this Pyromancer, those are all going to be crucial. If Goodnight Nick can get both of those, they might just get far enough ahead that it doesn't necessarily matter what Pandamonium has.
Yeah, and that's where Pandamonium have to choose. Do we let all these go quietly and try our hand at a Phoenix defense, or do we show up and try to fight around these objectives? Ice does have a lot of kills, but does not have a level lead over Cherio. Getting this bounty would be massive, and Cherio wants it, and Cherio's got it. Ice dies for only the second time this game, and that's a big bounty infusing itself into Cherio's pockets. Deathwalker's rotated on from Solo. Massive stun from Deathwalker, but it has not gotten any kills. Somehow Pandamonium winning this fight. Streak Up had to hit those snipes to at least get a kill here for Goodnight Nick, and he done so.
Giving it 2-1, and they're just far enough back. What a good pull from Wolfie. I don't know if they're going to get another kill.
Oh my god, that Riptide was nasty from Okeanos, right back into the damage. And so Wolfie is able to find another kill. Joshi on a killing spree, so suddenly this Izanami starting to feel a little bit more comfortable in the game. The gold lead is still wide. But we are seeing now that there's still some strength from Pandamonium.
And showcasing that they have a decent fight in them. And look, they kill off Kana and Cherio. I think Cherio's probably going to stay consistently that difficulty to kill, right? You're going to be able to get him, but not before they turn around a lot of damage in return. Kana's just going to get harder to kill. Kana's going to be picking up another protection item. Got to have the healing as well. And so I think Goodnight Nick are showcased that, yes, you are in control. Yes, you've got a gold lead, but you really need to maintain this.
Goodnight Nick drop the Fury when it has like 100 HP. Ice jumps into the back. Goodnight Nick take down the Fury, but Shoxy Foxy wants this low health target in both Streak Up and Wolfie. 4 members of Goodnight Nick are going to start to close this gap, though. Ice has to brutalize away as Hawk does a whole lot of damage. Is the range there? Yes, but the healing is also there from Okeanos. And so Goodnight Nick able to live for the time being, but watch out, Cherio's diving under the tier 2 tower, and he's got a double kill. And now Cherio on this Loki starting to pull this game back.
I mean, that's maybe the best case scenario for you. You not only get the tier 2 dive, you get a tier 1 in left. You're able to get aggressive onto this team. Yes, you lost the Fury, but now you're even opening up this tier 2. You kill off their mid, you kill off their jungler, and that is, I mean, 6-4, 9-3. What was it? It was 6-1 and 3-2 earlier. So ultimately, kind of going around the same route for the two of them. Pandamonium have been able to pick up a lot of that slack. And Dave, I mean, unless they can make some big rotations, we're still waiting 2 seconds for people to respawn on Goodnight Nick. This is a really good draft, or at least a good play, I should say, from Pandamonium right now and controlling the map.
This Pyromancer is free. There was a 2-level lead in the mid lane for Wolfie. That is now gone. There was a wider lead for Deathwalker in the solo lane. That is now gone. Oh, well, not entirely gone, still 2 levels, but it was worse just a moment ago. Kana has somewhat caught up here. And so all of these big lead score are either gone or have shrunk down significantly. And I look towards Joshi here as well. So not only has Cherio made some big plays throughout this game, Joshi on this Izanami has showed up in the right moments. Some dark portals have been connecting throughout this game that have made things interesting. The Tainted Steel has felt pretty good, I think, up against this Umoja. Now 4-1 and a level and a half lead over Streak Up. Kana's going to need some of that sustain, some of that healing for himself here, as everyone from Goodnight Nick, except for Mid and Hunter, are by this tier 1 tower, and not enough damage to kill off Kana, so Goodnight Nick will leave.
And this has been good back and forth between them. I actually am interested in, I think, more invested in this next Fire Giant than any neutral objective up to this point, because this is where it starts to make a big difference. Ice is forced to ult.
That's a good double stun from Ice, but the Ragnarok has found no one. Shoxy Foxy alone in the River's Rebuke, and the Lurking in the Waters will allow Shoxy Foxy to leave this fight, but the Riptide will keep him right where he is. Dash has to get used defensively. Deathwalker is going to follow up with the banner and the ultimate, and now a lot gets spent trying to find a pick there, but Pandamonium also uses a lot to get away from being picked out. And so both teams spend a little bit, both teams end up with nothing.
3 ults for 2 when it comes down to it. Goodnight Nick a little worse off there. But you do manage to burn Cherio's beads. Kana is also feeling a lot less safe. Beads down, as well as that Heavenly Agility. And ultimately, you're missing Blink, Bracer, a Teleport. Like, you're not really hurting too much on the side of Goodnight Nick in terms of relics. And so I think you're fine with that. A little overcommitment on the ults, but you get a lot of commitment from the relics on the other side. Now Pandamonium less safe in the next engagement. Specifically Kana, who I'm going to keep highlighting as a primary target, because unless that hell goes down, I think it's going to provide a lot of space for Cherio and for Joshi and for Hawk to continue getting their damage out unanswered. And it's not enough to pivot into anything like a Gold Fury, or sorry, a Fire Giant as of yet. Pyromancer and Gold Fury still have a couple of minutes before they're both back up, so realistically this is a map state. Where can we get the pressure? Where can we find some minion waves? Potentially invade the jungle if they had looked for it, but Goodnight Nick right now are going to have to figure out where this pressure is important to them, because that's going to pretty much pivot up on the next round of neutral objectives.
Man, nobody is close to Deathwalker in the XP per minute charts. 775. The next closest is Joshi at 700 even. So that shows you why there's a bit of a 2-level lead over there in the solo lane. Kana's got that Lotus Crown that you mentioned earlier on, Gore. That'll feel pretty good up against a lot of where the damage is coming from. That's Deathwalker, that's Ice Ice, that's Streak Up, and he'll need it now. Ragnarok is there onto this hell, and it should be a kill, and it is a kill for Goodnight Nick, and immediately over to the FG goes the order side. Is there an answer from Pandamonium? Cheerio will say yes if he has it his way. Has the ultimate, but the Fire Giant's not been reset.
And they're keeping it at half health. And it's a 4v5, so they've got the control. River's Rebuke is up. Deathwalker has their ult. It should be good control from Goodnight Nick.
Deathwalker walking towards Hawk here. Cherio's in the back. Ice Ice has used the leap and the Brutalize as well, as Cheerio will use his ult to get on out of the fight. A couple snipes missing out onto Cheerio here. The Fire Giant has been reset. There's 13 seconds left on Kana's respawn, and there's no teleport for that hell. You're going to have to walk all the way back from base if you're Kana. Will the Fire Giant be re-pulled? The answer is yes, but Pandamonium not going to let this one go easy.
Shoxy still has ult. Hawk as well, able to get aggressive here. So it's not a guaranteed thing, and Cherio's lurking in the backline. He's going to get spotted out, but not taken down.
Avoiding some extra brutalized damage as well. Ragnarok gets used, but does not have anyone in his mouth. Shoxy Foxy will get taken down by Wolfie as Joshi used the Dark Portal, got some damage in that fight as well. Cheerio alone with everyone from Goodnight Nick as an Aegis comes out, the Leap comes out, and suddenly Pandamonium playing with a little more wind in their sails. Riptide will keep him at bay, but Cheerio has the ability to chase this down, does not have Assassinate, but watch out, Deathwalker's here on the right.
Ice Ice is still low but not out. Okeanos is going to have to back out of this fight, but everybody else is still able to get re-engaged.
Oh, Cheerio goes back in with the Assassinate and gets the kill, but Wolfie will immediately trade out. So a 1-for-1 trade as Cheerio jumps into the back line. The Madman will get Streak Up off the map. That's a good target, Gore. This Fire Giant probably not under all that much threat from Goodnight Nick now, as your Hunter is no longer here.
Yeah, ultimately neutralizes what Goodnight Nick were trying to do. Maybe could set up Pandamonium for at least something. They're setting up for a Pyromancer, so they are going to open up that conversation. And that's what losing someone like Streak Up does. Ice Ice does decent damage. Deathwalker with this build can do a little bit of damage as well. Merlin is still going to provide a lot of burn, so if you went for an Oni Fury here as Goodnight Nick, or a Pyromancer had it not been taken, or a Fire Giant, you still could burn it down. But not as conveniently and not as convincingly, I think, as if you had Streak Up around. So you're really going to have to play patiently. Good call on Cheerio. And recognizing, like, you know what, sometimes I'm going to have to die for it, but I'm Loki. I'm going to go in, I'm going to get the kill. And as long as you go 1-for-1 minimum in a trade like that, you're going to feel pretty good about it if you take out Streak Up or Wolfie. And I think that's the route for Pandamonium. I mean, at this point, last game they were, what, 7,000, 8,000 gold behind? Now it's 2,000, 3,000 as that Fury goes down. And ultimately, not anywhere near as much of a runaway game for Goodnight Nick.
Not from what we thought it was going to be when Ice Ice had 9 kills and 0 deaths, or just 1 death. 1 kill and 2 deaths is how that KDA is changed up a bit in the last couple engagements. Oni Fury to Goodnight Nick makes sense. Ice Ice has the Oni Hunter's Garb. Maybe Oni Hunter's Garb should give you like 100% extra damage against the Oni Fury specifically. What do you think? Good balance decision there?
Just because they both have Oni in the name?
Well, he's an Oni Hunter.
And then the Oni Warriors and the SBL get, like...
Yeah, that's their passive.
Inherent passives in-game.
I don't know if I mean, it's got to be a pretty weak passive, right? Like, just getting extra damage to the Oni Fury specifically.
I don't know. Oni minions are nice.
I guess we'd have to compare it to what the other passives end up being. We'd have to balance around the other team passives that everyone else... Oh, it's just the Oni.
It's just the Oni Warriors.
The Oni Warriors would like that passive going into the Phase 2 playoffs, which start tomorrow, by the way. And the Oni Warriors will be playing tomorrow, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. The SPL Phase 2 playoffs will kick off. But we got a whole lot of SCC fun to get through today. And right now it's Goodnight Nick trying to continue pushing that advantage that they've built up through the first 21 or so minutes. But this game has slowed way down, and we're getting to that point where this hell really has to be worried about. You look at then anti-heal. What's the conversation, the decision-making around that? Wolfie, a fantastic spreader, applicator of that Divine Ruin. He's got it on the Merlin, but not a whole lot else here for Goodnight Nick, and this Fire Giant's going to be a great spot to see some of that strength out from this Hell.
I think that watching Wolfie, and specifically Wolfie's abilities, are going to be crucial. There's like early River's Rebuke as well, and it only catches out Kana. That's not going to be great for Goodnight Nick.
This Fire Giant is not going down quickly. It's a double dive into the back, but it's an immediate disengage from Goodnight Nick. Up in the air is Streak Up, and Cheerio is lurking in the back line. Deathwalker is going to be the first to go down as everyone from Pandamonium was looking at him. Shoxy Foxy dashes on away. Ice has gone back in, but Joshy's got a double. He makes him pay the iron price. And Ice now falls to 10-4, and Pandemonium pick up a clean 2 kills.
And queue up Hell and healing abilities. They should be topped off. This is going to be a Fire Giant start for Pandemonium. And everybody, I mean, Okeanos had to fall back all the way to base. Streak Up had a lot of damage, but is now having to go back to base. Wolfie as well. They're just not going to be able to contest this one.
Wow, Joshy and Cheerio have had a game, huh? Where you're looking at Ice early on here, and this is going to be a solo carry performance out of the Fenrir, but it's kind of been anything but after the last couple of fights that we've seen here. Joshy has played lights out on this Izanami. The dark portals and the positioning have been completely on point, and then Cheerio has been so obnoxious and disruptive as far as stealthing into the backline, using the Assassinate aggressively and sometimes defensively, picking those fights well. And then, of course, you have Kana, who's Hell, and he's healing everyone up, and now everyone's full HP after a team fight and a Fire Giant attempt. And so you can siege this right side Phoenix, which is going to be open somewhat cleanly, though you might choose differently because everyone from Goodnight Nick is back.
I mean, that is, I think, the good defense that they have is a lot of stuns, good River's Rebuke, things like that.
Ooh.
Could very easily find themselves a defense as well as killing off Joshy very early on. That's a great way to start your defense, is just take away the carry and save most of your structures. So what, they lose a tier 2 and now that's going to maybe put a pause on it, yeah.
Right? I mean, you're 3 minutes left on this Fire Giant buff. 45 seconds of it is going to be without your Hunter. And so you're going to have about 2 minutes by the time Joshy is in any sort of good position to be fighting here. And so this is a good call, I think, from Goodnight Nick. We got a 4v5. Let's push this advantage as far as we can. We'll open up a Phoenix of our own, counter out the open Phoenix that Pandemonium was able to find. And so, Gore, that's a pretty costly drop there from Joshy. The blink and ult in from Ice just caught him off guard.
Yeah, honestly, good calls from Ice. I mean, 10-4 and 5 for a good reason here, and ultimately, they've been able to find a lot of pivotal targets in this game. Joshy having no beads, granted for 17 more seconds, so by the time we see another fight, Joshy will have those. But that's the kind of things you have to be able to abuse when you know that they're available. You get that tier 2, you get a Pyromancer, you're really opening up a good conversation, at least in Goodnight Nick's eyes, that your gold lead's going to be in your favor. They're not going to be able to find too much, if anything, realistically, out of the rest of this Fire Giant. Maybe a tier 2, maybe this Primal Fury, depending on how well you stick around for it. And so ultimately, you're coming up at a wash if you're Pandemonium. You're not necessarily getting too much. So Goodnight Nick have done exactly what they needed to, which is set themselves up to not lose.
Yeah, it's these next minute and 45 seconds where Pandemonium are going to show us how comfortable they still are pushing. As you mentioned, maybe some tower fighting could go the way of Pandemonium here. Deathwalker's got to be careful. You don't want to be the one getting caught out. That is a lot of damage from Cheerio. Heartseeker, as well as the rest of the full nuke build that Cheerio has gone for here, makes Deathwalker think twice. Sovereignty for Deathwalker, as well as the Spirit Robe. So there is some defense later on down the build there. But this Bologna Gore, you know, it's a great build as far as, you know, early damage, and you got the Icavale and the Shoguns, and you can just swing away with those changed up auto attacks. But you are sacrificing a little bit of tankiness.
Yeah. And you can feel the Deathwalker. I mean, look at the health bar. Perfectly fine getting aggressive. I think it just comes down to the damage being dealt on the other side. Titan's Bane picked up for Joshy, which is going to help bleed through a lot of that protections, or those protections, and make it a little simpler in terms of time for Pandemonium to try and turn things around on Deathwalker. Same thing for Okeanos if they get caught out. And Pandemonium, at least in my eyes, are doing a lot more than I kind of expected.
Yep, agreed.
Granted, they lost Joshy so early on. I thought it was going to be a lot more of a slowdown, or Goodnight Nick were going to be able to put up maybe a little bit more of a fight, but so far, It feels very similar to what happened with Pandamonium last time around. Not quite to the same extent with the neutral objectives, way more proactive from Goodnight Nick, despite losing the Fire Giant. But ultimately still sitting back and just kind of watching as other things happen, as opposed to stepping up to him. And granted, 4 members with Fire Giant on the other side. It's not like it's going to be an easy fight. And so I'd hedge my bets on a defense just as well.
Just to give you context of how far ahead Goodnight Nick was in the gold department, we are just now back to even. After literally every tower on the map was taken by Pandamonium and a Fire Giant, we have just now gotten back to even as far as gold goes. And so gold will be even going into this next fight. XP still a little bit for Pandamonium, though when you're 27 minutes in, XP doesn't really matter all that much, except for the supports. Shoxy Foxy a couple levels down of Okeanos. Neither support have upgraded that starter item. And just now, Cherio gets that Hidden Blade, and you thought that this Loki was doing a lot of damage earlier on. I mean, an Assassinate connecting once the Hidden Blade is able to proc Gore, especially if that's onto Wolfie or Streak Up, maybe even Ice, that's going to raise some eyebrows as far as the damage that comes in.
Yeah, they're not going to like it. Is the simple way to put it. I think Cherio...
So 20% of their HP just for hitting some damage?
just to exist, just to be Loki in the case of this game. And so Cherio is going to be able to find a lot. He has been going often onto Ice as well, so Ice with a little bit of tankiness might be able to survive some of that, but it's all up to, well, maybe this River's Rebuke.
And Okeanos has thrown out these River's Rebukes a couple of times, but they've been very early in the fights.
Yeah.
And have gotten very similar value to that one, where Pandamonium just kind of Travoltas, they look around, they say, okay, we'll wait a second before we end up going back in. So that's a big team fighting ultimate for Okeanos that had no value or very little value there and won't be here for the rest of this team fight if Pandamonium play this one quickly. Fire Giant gets started here. Kana might be able just to do this with Joshi with the amount of sustain that this Hell is able to put out. Blink in from Ice, and that's on to Cherio, who uses the beads and then an Assassinate away because the Ragnarok would have been there by the time the beads wore off. Deathwalker on the left here, putting some pressure on Nakana. Shoxy Foxy with that Bridwin shield, considering dashing back in, but now Deathwalker defensively uses the ult as well. We're at a wash.
And ultimately, you're still in a good position to get aggressive here. I want to say if you're actually Goodnight Nick, just because Wolfie's going to be able to do a lot of damage. Soon enough, that River's Rebuke's actually going to be back off cooldown, so maybe a really good redemption chance for Okeanos.
Oh, great pluck onto Wolfie. It's a perfect target for Shoxy Foxy, and the Dark Portal nearly has enough damage, but Wolfie lives on, but does not have beats, does not have Aegis. This Merlin is going to have a difficult time participating in the rest of this fight. Deathwalker goes in to buy some space, but immediately has to dash back out. River's Rebuke is there, Gore, and the snipes from Shriek Up, and you're going to have Deathwalker and Ice's ults up and available shortly, but you can say the same thing about Pandamonium. We're getting very close to being back at square one.
Small amounts of healing. It's actually very fun watching Okeanos try to do this because the Fire Giant started up on the other side. I'm going to put more pressure on it. I'm going to call it out now. Okeanos needs a good River's Rebuke in this next fight, or else it's all going to fall apart.
Whoa, Deathwalker has gone in alone, and the Pyromancer goes to Pandamonium anyway around the backside. Is Cherio? Oh, but what a read from Ice as the Assassinate from Cherio runs face first into the River's Rebuke. Shoxy Foxy has found the first kill here, and it's a perfect combo of ultimates from Goodnight Nick to get the kill onto Loki. It might have been the biggest target they could have found.
A good flurry of snipes as well, gets some damage onto Shoxy Foxy, makes them fall back. You've got Wolfie and Streak Up. Not a lot of secure on the side of Goodnight Nick. But when it comes to burn, I expect them to be able to turn the heat up for a Fire Giant. Nope. They're going to still, back away. I mean, admittedly, they kind of need to heal and look at the inventory. Everyone needs some wards as of right now. I expect them to come back pretty much full from top to bottom. And they're in a good position. I mean, they still have 30 seconds with no Cherio. Honestly, if I'm Goodnight Nick, I'm maybe beelining it towards the Fire Giant, knowing that we have the burn potential.
Deathwalker also a couple seconds in front of Cherio as far as respawns go. So you are missing your Bologna for a little bit here as well. But as far as pressure applied, Cherio probably winning in that department. But I go back to that read that Ice had. You knew exactly where Cherio was going to be. You get the stun, you get the Ragnarok. Okeanos had the River's Rebuke, and the Ragnarok face smashes Cherio, who tried to assassinate away. And so that looked great for Goodnight Nick, getting that target off the board early. You got to look at actives going into this next fight. Which ones are far away from coming back up? Well, you can consider Hawk, 75 seconds on those beads. 95 seconds on Cherio's Aegis. And then both of Wolfie's actives will be coming up at least in the next 30 seconds. But we might not have that much time. Those are the 4 that are down and the 4 that might not be back up for this next fight.
And maybe the 4 that matter the most. Wolfie, with a brilliant pluck, was able to, well, he escaped a brilliant pluck, I should say, but doesn't have the same capabilities now. The beads are up, so that's going to help him a little bit. Aegis in 20 seconds. If Shoxy Foxy isn't able to find him in that time frame, then there's nothing to worry about. If you're the Merlin, you should be fine and able to get out of there. Hawk, on the other hand, does still need to be stressed out because he has much longer of a cooldown. You had highlighted Cherio as well. And they're being a lot more cautious than they have been in the last couple of fights.
Deathwalker being locked down just a bit. It's a double stun from Deathwalker and his ultimate. And the snipes from Streak Up on the back end have not found much here. So Pandamonium maybe barely winning that initial engagement. Deathwalker half HP will be sustained a little bit by Okeanos. Streak Up, no snipes. And nobody from Pandemonium spent anything. It's a blink and a pluck onto Okeanos, who uses the River's Rebuke, and that'll separate out this fight. Lurking in the waters is Streak Up, and the Pridwin Shield comes in just in time. Cherio aggressed on by Deathwalker here. This would be a fantastic opening kill to this fight, but Deathwalker doesn't have that ult to close that gap. We've seen a lot of defensive assassinates from Cherio. Is this one defensive enough? Yes,
wow.
It is.
And just barely. I mean, Deathwalker blinks forward. That's good peel from Shoxy, and nice knock-up to push Deathwalker just back enough that he's not able to get the last hit. Cherio Paxton is going to be in this fight again.
Fire Giant's been started up by Goodnight Nick. Shoxy Foxy is low here, and it's the roll forward from Streak Up to put him back in range. Deathwalker up and down, and Shoxy Foxy in the ground. Ice with the opening kill of this fight, but Okeanos being damaged heavily by Joshi and Hawk, and now 2 more kills swing the way of Pandemonium. You thought you had an advantage if you're Goodnight Nick, but it's anything but. The carries for Pandemonium get it done.
Yeah, Streak Up and Wolfie having to run away together, and honestly, it's not looking too great. I see Streak Up gets caught out. Cherio's waiting in the jungle for just one of them. He should be able to find, the kill onto Streak Up. That's a minute now with no Streak Up on the board. A 2v5. Pandemonium should be able to control the Fire Giant if that's what they want.
Ice is in the backside of the Pandemonium jungle here. Cherio has his ultimate. Ice has beads. Can the 11 and 4 Fenrir get something done? Cherio says no, as beads get used by Ice, and Cherio's just going to separate out this fight. Yeah, imagine Cherio would be able to win it. Ragnarok finds some damage. It's a 1v1 between Cherio and Ice. You'd love to have this FG buff, but Ice wins the 1v1. Fire Giant is low here and gets secured by Pandemonium. This one is enhanced as well. Ice looking to get out of this fight, and he will at least stay alive, but a great pick on a Cherio. Keeps in an immediate push at bay.
And I will say, it sucks for Cherio to lose his life, especially right before the Fire Giant buff goes down for his team. It makes things a little more awkward for them. But you burned down everything Ice had in their kit, so you made it a lot easier for your team to make sure they had that Fire Giant. I think if you still have a leap for Ice there at the very end, there's a very solid chance that that Fire Giant ends up on the belts of Goodnight Nick. So Pandemonium lucking out that Cherio chased a kill, didn't get the kill, gets killed by the kill he was going for, and Ice is able to turn things around the way they wanted to. But still, it's the proactive play from Goodnight Nick. This is the second time they have been the team without Fire Giant, and yet they're the ones that are making moves on the map. They get the first neutral objective in that Fury.
Joshi continues to perform well, though. Especially when that fight initially started with Goodnight Nick in the advantageous spot, and they start to push forward a little bit. But Joshi and Hawk were able to just kind of detonate damage onto Goodnight Nick, made him think twice. Cherio's back on the map here, the only one without the enhanced, that's important to remember, an enhanced Fire Giant buff. That's a big swing now in this game, especially when it comes team fight time. Remember, way earlier on, the last time we saw a big push happen, Pandemonium was able to open up all 3 Phoenixes. So they're in a great spot to maybe even end the game here with 2.5 minutes left on this enhanced Fire Giant buff. But Goodnight Nick have shown with some power plays, with some strength here, that they're not going to go quietly.
I think that's the difficult task for Pandemonium right now, which is you have a team that isn't going to give up on, and they are going to fight you tooth and nail. And admittedly, they have a good defense with Deathwalker, Okeanos, hell, with Streak Up damage and Wolfie's damage. If you get under a Phoenix here and you're Pandemonium and you're not prepared for it, you're going to get burned down before anything can happen. Pandemonium still have Fire Giant, and they've got it on Joshi.
Do they?
Ultimately, 7, 2, and 3.
Do they have FG Glare? They're
going
chilling,
to be able to do something with it. Yeah, they're kind of relaxing. Like,
We got
really
enhanced
hard on this.
FG on 4, baby. Let's sit under our tier 2 tower on left and see what happens. Nothing
You know, it
happens.
strips back door protections, but on the other side of the map.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. Well, you wouldn't know it by the way, Pandamonium. I mean, I get you're playing cautiously here. You know, you don't know where Ice is necessarily. You don't have great ward coverage on the left side, so you don't want to overextend initially. You're sensing that Goodnight Nick maybe is pushing forward, but that's not the case. Of course, we have God View. Pandamonium and Goodnight Nick do not. And so things that we take for granted maybe aren't quite so easy for either of these two teams to read. Now there's a push coming out with 1 minute exactly remaining on the enhanced Fire Giant buff. We might get one Phoenix Siege here. Ice is positioning himself aggressively to not only engage, but engage onto Hawk, engage onto Joshi, but it's a good chunk of damage with Obshard, plus the Soul Gem proc, plus plenty of penetration in that build to make Ice turn around. River Rebuke starts this one off from Okeanos. Shoxy Foxy dashes away. It's another early Rivers Rebuke that doesn't find much.
Cherry is looking to make a rotation. That might be crucial because he can find a huge pick.
Whoa, that's a lot of damage, and Shoxy Foxy was not ready for it. And so Joshi and the rest of Pandamonium, they've got to back away. There is some healing from Kana that'll keep those health bars topped off, but aggressive pathing here could keep Goodnight Nick in the driver's seat.
And honestly, if they keep getting aggressive like this, I mean, go for it. Go deep at this point because Shoxy Foxy was the one who was going to pluck you out of position, make things really awkward for a team fight. I think you are in a great spot if you're Goodnight Nick to coast this one out. Fire Giant's going to disappear right here. Pyromancer's up. I actually want to see him back and re-aggress into the jungle. Get some wards to make sure you have the vision advantage. And go for a Pyromancer after you secure your own buffs. Yeah, okay, maybe push up mid a little bit. But then you're going to be able to find yourselves not only a good neutral objective to help actually close up the gap that is now leading for Pandamonium, but also put yourselves in a really good fight position for the next Fire Giant, having that Pyromancer buff on your side. They haven't gone over to it yet, Dave, and that means it's wide open instead for Pandamonium.
Yeah, Goodnight Nick can absolutely contest this. We are back to dead even here in game number 2. Pandamonium had a little bit of time with that enhanced Fire Giant buff. They made one attempt at a Phoenix Siege that immediately got pushed back. And so doing a little with a lot kind of is Pandamonium. Unfortunately, Cherio died right as that enhanced Fire Giant buff went down. So that largely slowed down what we saw. We are cresting the 40-minute mark here in game number 2, one that if you watched early, you're figuring Goodnight Nick is just going to win this game because Ice was off to a 9-1, 6-1 start, something ridiculous like that.
He's still 12-4.
Yeah, but you know he's been stuffed a handful of times. Ice has, and so this next fight, you'd assume, would decide the game. But neither of these teams score. I think worth mentioning, with how bad things have been one way or another. Feels like there's been no just kind of free fights traded out. There's always been something that makes it a little bit more even for one side or the other.
I think that's the big problem right now. I think actually I'm gonna throw Okeanos under the bus just because again a couple of these Rivers Rebukes at the beginning of these fights haven't been on point. Deathwalker as well, sometimes getting maybe over aggressive without the team behind him. I think Goodnight Nick, if they can just clean up their engage on this fight, all of a sudden are going to be able to turn things around. Otherwise, that's what's giving a lot of the openings over to Pandamonium is Deathwalker 2 steps too far forward, so there's no follow-up on the ult. Ice 10 steps too far forward, but gets the ults out of Cherio, so ultimately might be worth it on that case.
I think you have to look at the Rivers Rebukes, right? Because Okeanos has thrown those out early and often.
With very little follow-up.
Right, and whether it's follow-up or the positioning or the timing, I mean, it is a huge ultimate, especially around where we're fighting, in the jungle, around these FGs. You can isolate a target so effectively. And so I think that's where my eyes turn here. If Okeanos can find a big one, or at least find some value for the rest of his team, that's a big difference here. Ice looking for a stun. Won't end up connecting on it. Hawk is taking a lot of damage here as Deathwalker dashes in. Joshi's going to turn around some damage onto this Bologna, and my goodness, has Deathwalker overextended. A little bit of healing. Oh, Hawk from over the wall ends up finding a big pick now for Pandamonium, and the chase is on.
Shoxy gets aggressive, doesn't get the pluck. And so that should slow Pandamonium down a little bit, but they're not looking for any objectives. They understand they can win the fight.
Cherio has Assassinate. Will it be needed? No, it won't. Okeanos kept at bay, and it's a killing spree for Hawk. who had a lot of damage earlier on the Deathwalker. Now Okeanos finds himself in the grave. It's only the squishy members of Goodnight Nick left alive.
And I mean, 5v3, Ice is deep in the mid lane as of right now. Get aggressive, get the Phoenix at the minimum, but take the fight.
I think you're sensing what Pandemonium have their eyes on, Gore, and it is not the FG. It is the mid lane Phoenix. Ice is keeping that wave from making its way into the Titan room, so someone from Pandemonium is going to have to tank this one up. Maybe we go to the Phoenix. That's probably an easier target than the Titan would be.
Well, they have the healing as well from Kana, so that opens up the conversation, but they only got 10 seconds left until Deathwalker comes through. Yeah, I think they had an open opportunity for it, especially with Ice gone. I mean, it was a 2v5. And so now all they've done is open up a conversation potentially for Goodnight Nick to at least show face around here. Streak Up has ult. I mean, if you're looking for steal potential, it's out the roof for Goodnight Nick right now.
Oh, it could be a bait here by Pandemonium. Shoxy Foxy, no good on the pluck.
Oh my God.
As he traded out his life. The snipes from Streak Up. Get that health bar low, but not low enough. Ice alone here. Pulls Cherio back in. And Cherio ends up getting dropped. So 2 ultimates down for Goodnight Nick. But Gore the Fire Giant has been delayed. Healing from hell is a lot, but not enough to top off those health bars for the FG.
Not keeping everybody in it the same way. The Pandemonium, I don't know. That one feels like a flurry. I don't know that you need to commit the 2 ults. I mean, Ice and Streak Up both use their ults there. And admittedly, they forced Pandemonium to not even look at the Fire Giant. But it does use a lot before this fight can even start, realistically. You didn't have everybody. They force Pandemonium back, and they keep things cushy. We're at that point in the game where, like,
what day is it?
I wanted to look up at the gold lead, and realistically, I think the only big difference maker I see is, like, Hawk doesn't have upgraded relics yet, and you're missing an upgraded relic there from Wolfie, the upgraded Aegis. Otherwise, it might as well be treated as even in terms of the builds. Hawk did just purchase instead of
for
going
good reason, right?
For
He's got
anything.
beefy
Well,
pot there.
Yeah, the huge pot that he's going to be able to pop for the next fight. Already dealing a lot of damage in the last engagement. He's 10k down from Wolfie, but that 10k doesn't necessarily matter because guess who's been picking up the kills the last few times? It's been Hawk, and so I expect a lot from this Morgan Le Fay. Plus 2 potions of power, just bought 1 for Kana, 1 for Joshi. I don't know, it feels like a lot of upgrades coming here for Pandemonium.
This is a brutal game to be a frontliner, at least with how far into this game we are, almost 45 minutes. Feels like on both sides we've seen one of the frontliners walk in to look for an engage, and then immediately take 3/4 of their health and damage and then have to leave. It's kind of the second engagement. If we can withstand the initial jump in on either side, get that frontliner low enough, and then engage after that, that's where maybe our win condition is. Cherio does a lot of damage to Streak Up. Hidden Blade, by the way, feels pretty good. And hence Fire Giant down to half HP, and it's Pandemonium starting this one up. Ice do not just want to be a fly on the wall. They want to be a participant. In goes Ice, and he's taken a whole lot of damage. It's a good River's Rebuke from Okeanos, but is it enough to give Goodnight Nick the team fight win? In the back line, the answer is yes, but Shoxy Foxy chasing down Wolfie. Hawk has got another kill on board. Cherio has done so as well. Wolfie, the last bastion of hope for Goodnight Nick, and 45 minutes in, Pandemonium will send us to a game 3.
And just good, clean kills to finally pick it up. It took him a while to get there, and I honestly thought Okeanos' River's Rebuke was going to be solid enough to at least give them a little bit more trouble on the side of Pandemonium, but Cherio just did a ton of damage. And I guess answers the question we asked 30 minutes ago, which jungler was going to be carrying the games harder. And I guess Cherio is the one who came out on top this time around. Really well played, I think, from Pandemonium. A couple of times where I think they could have been a little more aggressive and more concise, but they got the win. That's what matters to them most. Took them a while to get there, but they showcased that time and time again they could topple over Goodnight Nick.
What day is it?
Now they have to showcase what they can do
Thursday?
in Game 3. It is Thursday.
Wow. That game really did it to me, Gore.
I didn't know.
That was a long. Well, good. I'm happy to remind you. Look, that is a back and forth affair. A lot of those team fights coming down to a knife's edge, and it's a knife's edge that sends us on to a game 3. Goodnight Nick versus Pandemonium, game number 3. Right after this.
okay. Sorry is it sorry does. She just wanna cut up in the car, I told her start it up. I don't wanna see it from your eyes unless it's Cartier. Ran into my old chick, she said you ain't playing fair. Playing fair, playing fair. Nah, I ain't playing fair. Playing fair, playing fair. Nah, I ain't playing fair. Asked her why she staying there, she said she don't know. I had to ask some more, but I really had to go and get my bop on. Yeah, I get my bop on. If she needs some good, tell her she got hop on. She know I'm the top dog, I know she a hot one. Balenci's on the feet, and you know I got the socks on. Yeah, I get my bop on. Yeah, I get my bop on. If she needs some good, tell her she got hop on. She know I'm the top dog, I know she a hot one. Balenci's on the feet, and you know I got the socks on.
She said with my hot sauce, she ain't with no knockoff. See them, we gon' pop off. Uber getting dropped off, kicking in the door, we ain't knock on it. Ice on your beat, and you know it got the bop to it. Running up the streams like the stock market. They ain't with no beef, tell them stop talking. Rock a goatee like I'm Hulk Hogan. Put on R&B, then I hit her with the slow stroking. Ooh. Then I told her she could hop on it, bop on. Yeah, I get my bop on. If she needs some good, tell her she could hop on. She know I'm the top dog, I know she a hot one. Balenci's on the feet, and you know I got the socks on. Yeah, I get my bop on. Yeah, I get my bop on. If she needs some good, tell her she could hop on. She know I'm the top dog, I know she a hot one. Balenci's on the feet, and you know I got the socks on. Yeah, yeah. Double B's on me, yeah. Double C's on the dough. Double D's dunking no. Going nuts for the flow. Tank on E, F it, bro. I'm a G, let him know. Who is he? ISO. Who is he? ISO. Pop on. Yeah, I get my pop on.
Hello and welcome back to the desk here for Pandamonium versus Goodnight Nick for our second SCC set of the day. Before we get back to that, if you guys missed out on it earlier, we got our mouse pads back in stock. If you haven't had a chance to pick up one of these SPL mouse pads, now is your opportunity. Limited time offer available, bringing it back here for the playoffs. If you haven't seen, I don't know if we can get a nice zoom in. You got all the teams that are on the right side of it, on the left side of it. You got all the different icons. You know, like the hunter, the assassin. You've got your buff camps as well. This mouse pad's huge. You can get it all different sizes, 8x16, all the way up to 2 foot by 4 foot. I think this one's not quite that same distance, but if you haven't had a chance to pick one of these up, go ahead and do so now. While we move away from the mouse pad, let's move back into game number 2 here. J-Mac Tucker joining me is Taco for now going in towards game number 3 of this matchup. It started out as a complete bloodbath, Taco. It was, what, like 25 kills up at like 10-15 minutes of the game? And then everything just kind of hit a brick wall and slowed down.
That was largely, I think, Pandamonium trying to keep that aggressive pacing going. You know, they had such a strong control in the earlier portions of the game, and Goodnight Nick just completely put everything to a halt. They just chose to delay and delay and delay, and it almost worked out in their favor. However, something that we were talking about while that game was ongoing is the simple fact that I think there was one crucial aspect that Goodnight Nick was really missing out on, and that's the utility and the tools to really deal with that health sustain. Ultimately, not having a cursed Ankh there for either Okeanos or Deathwalker, it just put so much strain, I think, onto Deathwalker and Ice, because as far as initiation is concerned, it is very difficult when you start climbing to that 30, 35, 40 minute period of a match, trying to be a warrior or even this bruiser assassin based type build that we saw Ice opting for. It's so difficult to actually try and tank and initiate and survive. One of those three things was almost always being sacrificed in the later stages of this game, and for the most part it was largely just Deathwalker having to exchange his life for pooled relics, but even then he wasn't able to force enough utility burn out of Pandamonium in order to actually create any further setup there for Goodnight Nick. And as I already kind of touched on, Okeanos with this Yamoja, I know some of you might be thinking, well, okay, send the Yamoja in, but Yamoja is the primary asset for Peel because Cherio was just an absolute menace in the backline otherwise.
Yeah, if we've preached it once, we'll preach it again here for you at home who don't know. You need to get anti-heal going against the Hell. They got one singular form of anti-heal via Wolfie and a Divine Ruin. Now, Merlin's a great god for Divine Ruin, but when you're getting to these 35-plus minute skirmishes and your frontline tanks who were one-shotting those squishies, well, they're not quite doing that anymore. Now those base values are not nearly as impactful, and you have to have some extra burst. And Well, unfortunately for Goodnight Nick, they didn't really have the tools to get to that back line to kill this hell, to kill these frontliners who are just sustaining too much because there's no answer to this healing. There's just too much coming out of it from Kana.
And the stats don't lie. That was nearly 31,000 in player healing there for Kana.
Gross.
Sure, he only had about 10,000, a little bit. I think it was just shy of the 11,000 mark in player damage. But when the trade-off is you have clear, because you have a wave clear, I think that was reliable. I think that the cleanse as well and the movement speed advantages for the ultimate chase down, because that was another thing that we kind of emphasize is, hey, this is a killer be killed sort of composition that Pandemonium are opting for here. And I think that all of the factors, like once they actually came together towards those later stages of the match, it just became too overwhelming for a Fenrir and a Bologna to actually deal with.
Well, game number 3, picks and bans are ready to go. We'll see if there's any adjustments here from Goodnight Nick to try and answer back. Maybe we actually do see this hell banned away finally. Please. If you're not going to pick anti-heal, don't let one of the best healers in the game get through. I think it's just plain and simple to put it out on the table like that. Is if you're not willing to counter the anti-heal, your best form to counter it is going to be in picks and bans. That's exactly what Goodnight Nick do. They banned that one away. Flip side, Pandemonium. You're going to take Odin off the board, who would have been a really good god, except, well, I guess it was banned away, so they couldn't pick it up anyway. So that would have been a really good god to maybe pick up against Hell.
I like this adaptation as well to taking away the Fenrir, because we've seen Goodnight Nick now 2 games in a row opt for it. Almost worked out for them in the second game. Ice did have a decent amount of success, I would say, to kind of counteract some of that early game pressure that we saw Pandemonium starting to develop, and probably a big part of the reason why they were able to slow things down as much as they were is because of the threat that Deathwalker and Ice were able to sort of apply elsewhere on the map throughout game number 2 here. But the Osiris lock-in, this is something that we have seen time and time again, getting put into that first pick position, and the primary reasons for it is just a simple fact. He's strong, he's got really great early to mid game presence, great scaling as well because he's a warrior, and ambiguous as to where he's headed.
And I think one big adaptation Pandemonium is finally making is, even though they won that last game, they finally took the Fenrir off the table. They have had enough of Goodnight Nick's Fenrir, whether it's support, whether it's jungle, doesn't matter. Get it off the table. The soul, once again, this time actually taken by Pandemonium, surprisingly, because Pandemonium's mid laner is the one who really does like this soul. But it'll be taken away, as well as the Tiamat and Artemis. That leaves the Osiris as a first pick. In response, Morgan Le Fay is taken away from Pandemonium, and instead, Pandemonium looking towards a Giannis to be locked in here for the mid lane.
A lot of global mobility with the Giannis, and I think that that's definitely going to complement the Osiris and the Sobek, because both of these are relatively aggressive initiators, and when you have that through space and time, or even just the general portals and that threshold, just to increase the mobility throughout these initiation periods, I think that Pandemonium seem to have their eyes set on possibly just trying to replicate some of that early to mid-game pressure they were able to establish in game number 2.
As the second phase of bans come through, it is going to be Rom and Loki taken away. So taking a shot at Cheria, who kind of looked pretty good on that Loki last game around, to say the very least for it. Meanwhile, for the flip side, the Pandemonium team will take Kabrakin away one more time, not allowing Ice to have that level of control and a Camazotz to boot. But that does still leave the circuit open. That's been one of the hot topics as far as the bans have gone for really both of these teams. Neither of them wanting to give away this circuit, but it will make it through here in Game 3.
I love this circuit pickup as well for Goodnight Nick. Not only do I think that it could be a really strong jungle asset, but most importantly, Giannis is tricky because he is so agile, so mobile, so hard to keep track of. But when you have an ambush, when you have that Deathbane, it's so much easier to keep track of where the Giannis is on the map. And most importantly, not only is Ice going to be able to consistently force portals out of this Giannis, but I also think that this circuit just in general has such strong rundown application that it's going to be tough for Pandemonium to get away. Then again, seeing the Cthulhu being added on top of all this other front line that's already been established here for Pandemonium, I think that there is a lot that could interrupt with some of that circuit mobility in terms of chase down against Giannis.
And the Deathwalker special, I think he's one of the only, if not the only person playing Mulan right now, especially coming out of that solo lane.
Sam takes great offense to that.
Okay, SCC. Let me drop to SCC. Deathwalker's the only one down in this league who is picking up this god. How does this Mulan kind of, well, maybe not. We'll kind of worry about exactly how this Mulan can go as we get ready to hop into game number 3. Who's going to take the set? Will it be Pandemonium or Goodnight Nick? Let's see if the casters can help us find out.
This has been a back and forth set so far. And we're only going to be doing one of those things here in game number 3. Pandamonium and Goodnight Nick go the distance as Dolson, Gore, and Doug will bring you the action one final time. And we've got some fun here, Gore, going into game number 3. Deathwalker on the Mulan, certainly a player who's not one to shy away from the interesting picks.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a fun one to watch. You go, so, man, this is going to be a wild one. It was Osiris game 1. I was like, what did we even see in game number 1?
Gore, it was many moons ago.
So long ago. And then, of course, the Bologna, now the Mulan, which I'm always excited to see the Mulan, especially up against something like a Cthulhu, because I feel like, honestly, this gives her better presence to level up her abilities. Like, you're not necessarily too worried about dying. You're also going to be able to get a lot of poke out there, help, well, just damage them. Like, you're just going to find some damage to level your things up and to master them as the game goes on. So it'll be fun to see how Deathwalker translates that into some of the late game, because a good Mulan ult in the middle of a team fight, that can change a lot.
Absolutely can. And this lane should feel okay for Deathwalker, you think. There's a lot of lane control from a Cthulhu. Streak Up hits level 2 before anyone, and there is a lot of damage finding its way into the Pandamonium duo lane. And a Fafnir stun with some Izanami autos is always going to set things up well, but that means Okeanos a little bit behind in the XP department, immediately ticks over to level 2, and that heal from leveling up might have been enough to keep Okeanos alive. There is a threat of First Blood looming large on the left side of the map. Kana's going to feel comfortable, though, here on the right, as we were talking about, with that one, maybe a half-level lead over Deathwalker.
I honestly still can't believe that Okeanos got out of there. That felt like it was such a surefire kill. And might still be. I mean, Okeanos is so low. All it takes is Shoxy Foxy to get one good pluck, and you're going to end up going down. Shoxy Foxy hasn't really been looking for the pressure.
This is a
instead
bait.
Just kind of
Ice
zoning him out.
Could be a bait. His Ice is here. One hammer makes all the difference in the world. Joshi has beads, but Okeanos won't go for it. And Ice will have to return to farming elsewhere. There's literally nothing on the left side of the map for Ice to farm up. And the options on the right side of the map starting to minimize as well. One back camp worth of Harpies will be there before the speed buff comes back up. So Cherio, kind of the opposite. He's had a wealth of options here. And so one level lead is Cherio on this Osiris in the jungle. We got to talk a little bit, though, Gore. I think about Hawk on this Giannis in the mid lane. Haven't seen a lot of it so far today. But the versatility of this pick, I don't think, has been understated or ignored throughout Season 8 so far.
And you know what? It might be worth mentioning there's a small lead in mid, which might be the first time that's happened for Hawk all set. He has not had a clean early game, which is by no doing of his own. It has been entirely on the other side. Ice and Wolfie constantly getting aggressive onto the opposing mid laner and just making Hawk uncomfortable.
Uh-oh, Cherio is now the one who is uncomfortable. He's taken a lot of damage here on his attempted invade. He'll walk away just fine, it appears. Wolfie ended up getting his red buff anyway. So now Cherio is under a bit of threat here. It would require a lot to kill off this Osiris. Shoxy Foxy and Okeanos meet right around the purple buff, and the purple buff gets dropped by Joshi. A lot of these small, individual, little engagements happening, but none of them resulting in kills just yet. Kana goes back to base, teleports back into lane with the health chalice, so that'll keep things a little bit more even there. Because that's one thing we always talk about with Mulan is the laning phase is so obnoxious. You get hit with the stun, and you get hit with the one that does some damage, and the 2 sustains Deathwalker, so there's a lot to fight against. And Cherio is learning that the hard way. Deathwalker is kind of 2v1ing here, but this is where the ultimate can make you pay. You root yourself, but you can cancel it early. Deathwalker didn't want to, though. Getting some damage in is Kana, so things still interesting, but look at the stun, look at the knockup, and look at the kill. Goodnight Nick, play that one perfect.
I could just watch that one back 3 times over. That was so well played from everybody on Goodnight Nick, but mainly Deathwalker. I mean, a good ult you had mentioned. Ruby
Oh, my.
And unfortunately, it's not going to pay off everywhere across the map. There's Hawk with an ult to be able to pick up a kill on the streak up. Yeah, I guess you have to pay the taxes somewhere. Deathwalker should have died like 4 times in that fight.
Okeanos is dodging a whole lot of autos here. Unstable Vortex up in 3 seconds. Instead, Joshi
Hello.
will use the ult from the left to get the kill. Wondered if Okeanos could have gone to the right there, and then you wouldn't have been so close to Joshi with that ultimate. I guess the portal was there, and that kept Okeanos from going that direction.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's a small moment, but Joshi now at least able to get a kill there, and so 1 level lead over Streak Up on the left side of the map. But no surprise, Gore, I think that Pandamonium are playing around this Mulan early on in the game and able to find a couple of kills on the right.
And I think, admittedly, when it comes down to pure glamour, I guess, of the kills, Goodnight Nick looked better when they did theirs.
They did.
Their two kills were cooler.
Right, I don't want
despite
to chase
the fact
down
that
Okeanos.
Pandamonium,
Gross.
admittedly, still able to tie it up. Plus, they got first blood, so still technically in their favor in terms of gold, although experience starting to pivot over in favor of Pandamonium, which is actually going to maybe start to showcase why here. I mean, Okeanos is definitely a huge chunk of that, as he's still level 4. Hadn't hit that 5 mark. Shoxy Foxy's 6.
Yeah, the 2 level lead in support will be the difference there on the XP charts. Deathwalker considering a rotation out of solo lane, instead just going to steal away. I don't know, those are technically aren't back harpies. They're like fire giant harpies, I guess. They're sort of towards the back of the map, depending on which way you look at it. Steal away the harpies. I'm going to stick with that one there. And Deathwalker takes a little possible XP away from Kana. It's as the game goes on, though, with this Mulan, where you really have to watch that power curve, because there was a moment there where I mentioned, you can cancel the ult, you kind of root yourself with a lot of your abilities. In that moment, it worked out because Deathwalker had the rest of his team closing the gap. It's in later on team fights where you're doing a whole lot of decision-making about how long you want to keep yourself rooted in place, because at this level of play, that'll get punished.
Not just punished, but I mean drastically changing the outcome of a fight, right? I mean, Hawk is going to be able to find easy damage onto you, Joshy should, Cherio should, so there's split-second decisions. Granted, Deathwalker has showcased time and time again in this set. I think split-second decisions can go their way, but sometimes you're in there and you're like, is it worth getting this next phase off? Because it is like, it's one of those things that the cancel isn't immediate. It is something that you're going to have to kind of, I want to say, I guess, predict for yourself as to which phase you're trying to get out of there for. That knock-up is nice. The damage at the end is very nice, but realistically, you're just trying to figure out a way to disrupt the team fight.
Okeanos transforms here as Ice and Wolfie got some damage. Shoxy Foxy's on the wrong side of things here, lurking in the waters. Will delay this out. Portal nearly reached, but Streak Up is able to get the first kill of this engagement. Okeanos makes for the second, and so we're even at 1-1. Both supports going down.
I like the way Okeanos plays that at first, and then they jump over the wall where nobody can follow up. That's where things kind of lose me, is the immediate, all right, let's go, let's see what we can do.
Whoa!
It didn't result in much.
Oh, that is a lot of damage. Joshy, go tower diving. Oh, he's got it from range. Joshy puts down Streak Up in the 1v1. But as everything has been going, it is an even trade out. As Ice picks up a kill onto Cherio on the right side of the mid lane. Neither team willing to let the other get an advantage. They're very nice, Score. Both teams allowing one another to trade back these kills and keep things even.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you just get a kill here? Wait, let me gift one to you to make sure they can stay close. Ice flirting with Death there. And I'm going to be watching that back.
Death was not interested.
I was going to say, he's going to be just fine. And now the slow realization, you can see Osiris walking straight towards the speed buff and then turns towards the mid lane, sadly, with the speed buff gone.
I think, if I'm looking correctly, a ward is there on the speed buff. I think you invade and you drop a ward just for the payoff of watching. Yes, just for the payoff of watching the enemy jungler invade and then realize it's not there and then leave. You know, in my own humble opinion, I think that there's some value in that. Maybe
it's not enough to be toxic and steal the speed buff. We've got to go further.
I gotta watch it happen. I gotta watch Cherio realize that my speed buff is gone.
I want to see the light leave their eyes.
Oh goodness, I don't want to sit here anymore. One of our other chair ones, come in here and take this headset. I need help. I need an adult. Oh no, Gore, you and I, we've been through it together. A long game 2. In what looks like a very even Game 3 through the first 10 minutes so far. Both of the carries for Pandamonium have been the ones benefiting in the kill department, whereas Ice plus Deathwalker plus Streak Up have been the ones for Goodnight Nick. So a little bit more variety on one side, but maybe a little bit more happiness in the kill department on the other. I mean, if you're getting your kills onto this Giannis and onto this Hachiman early in the game, I find it hard-pressed to be sad about that.
Yeah, you'd be right. I mean, at least they're getting kills on the Cherio. I think this Osiris is definitely a good target to find, but Hawk would definitely be a lot more tempting, at least a lot more appealing, if 2 of those deaths were on them. Either way, I think they're controlling a lot of this fate right now for Good Night Nick. And it's just whether or not they can control. I'm looking at neutral objectives now that are going to be coming up. I mean, Gold Fury spawned over there on left side, but Pyromancer's going to be here soon. And with the way things have been going, Joshi notably has been the one kind of dominating the left-hand side of the map. That's going to be a really, really important change of pace when they do end up joining the rest of the team fight.
Yeah, Streak Up has had to leave effectively every single time that Joshi has turned that corner. We have not seen a lot of Hachiman. Been a lot of these stim-based hunters here recently. Still Ikavale, still Odibo have been kind of items 1 and 2 in most hunter builds. Have started to see some variety as far as going full pen, going full bow. You know, crit has started to make a little bit of a return. I think there is versatility in the hunter pool at the moment, Gore, but those first 2 items feel relatively set in stone except for outside circumstances. But Hachiman has kind of remained on that fringe where, you know, it's been a lot of Artemis, a lot of Ram. Suddenly it's a lot of Iza. And then, you know, maybe Hachiman, maybe a little
like
Hou Yi.
sprinkled in there occasionally.
Sprinkled in there at the end. Nice garnish.
Yeah, and honestly, I think he's doing well. You go back, watch that solo kill he had on Streak Up again. That's part of the reason that you can really like Hachiman. I mean, you drop just the stun onto somebody. Difficult to do a lot of the times in the middle of like a team fight. But you hit someone with it, and all of a sudden you're set up. He's got a 2-0-2 lead over 1-2 there for Streak Up. I mean, he's been able to pick up both the kills in the duo lane. He's just been playing well.
Gore, you mentioned how Hawk would be a great target. Hawk uses a portal to get on out, but here is the follow-up from Goodnight Nick. Wolfie sends some damage Cherio's way. Through space and time was aimed at Ice, but will not connect on the desired target. Cherio has to leave this fight, though. Hawk is, or Wolfie rather, has used his ultimate. Shoxy Foxy lurking in the waters, but all the self-peel connects onto this Sobek, and Goodnight Nick make the overextension pay.
Everyone on Goodnight Nick turned and had one unifying moment. Every single one of their brainwaves was unified and linked up following the exact same frequency, and it was, let's kill Shoxy Foxy. Let's stop him, let's lock him in, and let's kill him down in the mid lane. And I think that just goes to showcase where Goodnight Nick have found a lot of these small advantages, at least in Game 1, where they were starting to find their advantages there at the beginning of Game 2 before things drug on a little too long for them. And I think if they can continue that here in Game 3, it's only 1,000 gold, it's only one kill that's separating them, but it does have good promise for what their fights are going to look like in like 2-3 minutes.
Gore, you talking about waves and frequency for some reason made my brain turn to this. Do you remember all the different parts of a wave that you learned? And
that's actually, I was looking at
trough, it. There's whatever the height from like the middle point up is something. I forgot.
That one might just straight up be the height.
Right. There might just be wave height. I don't know why that made me think about that. But.
What kind of so here's a better question. When you're thinking of like a frequency, what kind of curve are you thinking of? Are you thinking of a sine or a cosine or?
Gore, you've already. I don't know,
Mine's
man.
a sine.
Neither of those Deathwalkers got the ultimate. Everything hits onto Cherio. Kana, unfortunately, is going to be locked in here. Wolfie getting all of the pressure on the other side. A lot of 3 versus 1 engagements going on now. Kana, though, could turn the tides with his own ultimate.
At this point, just trying to run away. Cthulhu's really good at helping find damage. Apparently, Hawk is the one with the delete button.
Deathwalker's going to chase him down, though. This Mulan still in a power position.
Oh,
a stun on Joshi from range. A little bit of damage is all Deathwalker needs. And Deathwalker's got it. A double kill, a rampage for this Mulan. Can Okeano stop the back? The answer is no. Ends up being a pretty good fight for the Goodnight Nick solo lane.
That's a good fight. But first, I gotta clear my conscience. I lied. I'm thinking of a cosine graph because that's the one that starts. Anyway, it is a good.
That's a sign that I didn't pay attention in science class.
Oh, look, I took that's a lot of calculus.
I did very well in like physics.
I want to break down the fight.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay,
no,
I want to know
do.
about your physics class
No,
too.
now I feel
I'm torn.
Break down the fight since that's the closest, right? We're not far removed from the fight, so I'll let you break that down.
Deathwalker's really, really making this Mulan look really good. I think that's the thing that is standing out to me the most. Kana has a great ult in the middle of that. You see Hawk's damage and output that it's capable of, but Deathwalker is able to lock people down a little bit more often at range at that. good knockups. I think this Mulan has really been a crucial point for Goodnight Nick so far in Game 3.
You good?
Yep.
All right, great. Actually, I don't really have much more to say. I did really well in physics, which made me think about waves and wavelengths and things like that. Math was always my my weak point in high school, though. I did really well in sciencey-based classes, but math was always sort of.
How far in those sciencey-based classes did you get? Because there is a certain point where it is just applied math. Like most of physics too. Is fluid dynamics and things like that, but then you just start doing integrals and all that fun stuff.
No, yeah, integrals is, I don't even know what that word means. So that's...
you never had to take integrals by parts, dude?
No, maybe
well,
the closest...
hold on, wait, that's a strategy. I don't know the name of the class.
You know,
Calc
the hardest math class I ever took was discrete math for my computer science minor.
Yeah.
I hated that class.
Oh, really? I love discrete math. I had a computer science major, though, so maybe that makes sense.
Right. Yeah,
I chose to be there.
I had to. I got to pick and choose a few of the classes for my minor. One that I was not able to choose was discrete math. And there were no numbers, like having to do math where everything's a letter
it's all logic,
or
baby.
a sentence or something. Nah, it didn't track
logic
for me.
and proofs.
Kana gets tossed back into the fray here as we return to Smite game, by the way. That's what we're casting right now. Primal Fury, or Gold Fury rather, being looked at. Pandemonium alone. Cherio able to take down the Pyromancer. And Goodnight Nick gets the Gold Fury plus Kana. So you call that a net win here for Goodnight Nick, but I think that's a good heads-up play by Cherio. Realizing with where your build is at the moment, you're able to solo out that Pyro and at least mitigate the gold loss a little bit.
Yeah, ultimately trying to keep things at least as even as they can be, right? If you're not going to be able to take a dip, or I guess a dagger to that gold lead that Goodnight Nick has.
Wait, that's Blink on Giannis?
You're going to be able to. That is a Blink Giannis. I would never have caught that had he not just used it there. And that opens up an interesting conversation, which is, why not Aegis? Which, admittedly, he might be able to escape occasionally, but I don't know how often we're going to see that Blink be helpful.
Shoxy Foxy would like Aegis right now, but unfortunately Streak Up's damage is going to stick, and it's going to hurt, and Pandemonium lose their support. You know, I was just expecting Hawk to get out with the portals and things like that, but then you see the Blink. I'm trying to remember, because we've now seen Blink Giannis a couple of times. When do you, I mean, outside of defensively, when are you using Blink? Get closer to a wall or something, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the only... I was like looking at it. I mean, there's not a lot of people, like on Goodnight Nick, they all have some way of chasing you down. And so it's a good way to disengage over a wall, say if your portal's on cooldown.
Or blink away from
potentially
Deathwalker.
to engage on something like if Shoxy Foxy, Kana get aggressive, you're able to then potentially go forward, maybe find a shotgun blast with your ult. It's going to be interesting to watch where Hawk... We'll keep a tally, I guess, of useful blinks versus not useful blinks. He's got one useful blink so far. That has been pretty helpful. I mean, it got him away, kept him alive. And so we'll have to just keep our eyes on it.
The only blink I've seen, for what it's worth, has been useful.
Exactly.
So
100%.
That's right. 100% usefulness from what we've seen. Blink might have rather been an Aegis there. Hawk is able to stay alive, but half of his health is missing. All the portals get taken here by the Giannis. Wolfie is low, so is Ice Ice, but the ultimate from the Circuit has sent Kana right on back. And look at Hawk, the repositioning has put this Giannis in behind Goodnight Nick. And a lot of the damage is there, but you've got to look out for this 602 Mulan, who is tearing through Pandemonium right now. A double kill for Deathwalker, but it is a 2-for-2 trade.
I mean, you end up losing Okeanos, though, which in my eyes is a much more worthwhile drop for Goodnight Nick than Kana and Joshi dropping on the other side. Shoxy Foxy as well has to back all the way to the base.
Oh, no.
And Hawk's alone. Hawk doesn't have that blink just yet, so they're isolated and no walls to work with.
Yeah, Hawk was not going to get the chance. Blink would have been kept in combat anyway, and so Hawk makes it a more tilted trade for Goodnight Nick. What was already there, Gore, for what you mentioned, the support going down in exchange for Solo, Mid, and Hunter, maybe three of the best targets
now it's
that you
definitely
could get.
worthwhile.
Goodnight Nick happy with the way that things have gone now over the last few minutes. 3,000 gold in the lead, 19 minutes in. And remember, this is where we've seen teams shy away from fighting like at all around these objectives, where the next Pyro, the next Gold Fury, the next Fire Giant, that's where Pandemonium in the past has chosen, we don't want this to get any worse. We're going to let all of those go and just defend our base. But I imagine you gotta try to steal or something here, because you know you're letting so much gold get onto the table for Goodnight Nick if you don't try to push back.
This is also where we really started to see a heavy pivot in Game 2. Was another 25 minutes of gameplay because of that, where all of a sudden Pandamonium just decided, like you said,
we weren't even
they
halfway
just
through
weren't
at this
going to
point.
be taking bad fights. Admittedly, they weren't taking mini fights, but they started to find their opportunities of, okay, well, here's a neutral objective we can go, and we can just sneak our way into there and grab it and get out of there. Make sure that Goodnight Nick don't further their lead. And they kept it, at about 3,000, 2,000 behind until they get a Fire Giant. And even their first Fire Giant wasn't that great. It just equalizes a lot of what was the gold lead then. And they continued that push until eventually Pandamonium had the lead.
Goodnight Nick are in such a strong spot right now. Deathwalker is level 20. Streak Up is level 20. Level 19 is Joshi. But we're 20 minutes in, and 2 members of your team are level 20. They had near 800 XP per minute just a moment ago, though reaching level 20, that stat's not going to matter anymore. But the opportunity to play around literally either side of the map, so strong right now. But Joshi is not far behind. Lots of level 18s for Pandamonium to keep that gap somewhat close. Let's see how strong Deathwalker really is, because Pandamonium have sent 3 to this Mulan. The arrow goes out not to stun, but to disengage, and Deathwalker Gore did not take a whole lot of damage.
So he's strong. That answers the question, right? How strong is he? Well, 3 people throw damage at him, and he walks out mostly fine. I mean, ultimately going to need a little bit of healing to be max health one more time. But he's going to be A-OK re-engaging. Ice is going to catch out this Pyromancer and actually go in on him.
Pandamonium takes the Pyromancer, so Goodnight Nick will not steal away. Ice gets plucked right on back, but Deathwalker is here, and Deathwalker can do damage no good on the through space and time from Hawk, and so Ice able to scatter on away from this fight. The Fury gets taken just a moment ago by Goodnight Nick, but Okeanos left alone, and Joshi makes him pay. Deathwalker now being looked at. Ultimate is there for this Mulan. Can use it defensively if you need, and Deathwalker will agree.
And gets almost a little bit of damage. I actually think split the Harpy camp there. I saw one of them go towards Chaos, and that was the only damage that flew by. So Deathwalker able to split the Harpy, but ultimately it's a Pyromancer and a kill onto the support there that Pandamonium pick up. Very, very helpful for them. And it feels solid, but Goodnight Nick are still pretty far ahead at this point. I mean, you get all of that, and at the end of the day, you're still not walking away with too much. And so Goodnight Nick are more than happy to continue taking a lot of these little fights, little skirmishes. And now, I mean, 22.5 minutes into the game, I'm saying that Fire Giant is going to be my big call. I want to see wards in everyone's inventory. Pandamonium is definitely filling that inventory, and they have a lot of blue wards already down on the right-hand side of the map. I think this is going to be the most important fight of the game.
Goodnight Nick start up the FG. Pandamonium considering fighting, but they might not have the opportunity. The Fire Giant goes down quickly. Deathwalker gets a stun on Nakana. Hawk with a nice bit of healing on that Soul Gem. Didn't need it, though, because the Giannis already full HP. Can the Cthulhu, with the ult, back away from the fight? The answer is yes, but Core, that is a big bit of team fighting that's now missing. Big knock-up from Kana, but no follow-up from Pandamonium.
Yeah, goes ult for ult. Deathwalker did drop theirs in the fight just to make sure that they could get a little more space. Ends up forcing the ult from Kana there. Now they're going to be able to get aggressive. They got minions and the Fire Giant. They're looking to burn down Shoxy.
Shoxy Foxy walks forward, but with the way Streak Up is built here, the chin size is going to decimate this front line as they walk forward. Joshi has that as well, so both hunters in a similar spot, but Kana the one who's in range, and Streak Up on a killing spree as Goodnight Nick find an opening on the right side of the map, and Pandamonium have got to leave. You're not winning a 4v5 against a full FG team.
And now they just get to run down what should be right lane. Yeah, try to get aggressive and open up this Phoenix. You've got a 4v5 for 40 seconds. The map is really yours to play with. It's just trying to find a pick, and maybe you're not feeling confident enough about the Phoenix play. You should at least be able to get a Tier 2 tower off of this.
And there was one Tier 2 tower already secured. Tier 2 in mid could be up next, but there's still 2 towers on the left side of the map as well, and it's the setup Fire Giant now for Goodnight Nick. You're not likely to see an end, but you are likely to see 3 exposed Phoenixes and maybe even 1 getting taken down. And I think we'll see that after Goodnight Nick take the mid. They'll head right on over towards the left. And so that, it's kind of been a tough game for Kana so far. 1-4 on this Cthulhu. And it's some of the shortcomings. If you get locked down, that dash gets kept at bay. You're kind of just there, right? And Izanami, especially in the late game, especially with Silver Branch and Chin Size, is going to make quick work of that health bar.
So far, Streak Up, has been outside of the, 2 deaths earlier where they were just getting bullied. In fact, there were quite a few that were not deaths where Streak Up was just getting bullied out of lane. Joshi was controlling the duo lane for a long portion of this. Since then, Streak Up's joined these fights and has been hitting a lot harder and a lot more often than what we've really gotten to see out of Joshi. The Hachiman controlled 13 minutes of the game, and then since then it's been very, very quiet. And so far, if Streak Up can continue this path, especially with the Chin Size, now the Silver Branch finished, I mean, you're going to be able to spend a lot more gold since you just got 3 tier 2s. I expect this to be a couple of full items. I just saw the Titans main, picked up there for Streak Up. They're just going to hit harder next time.
Yeah, that was a 3K gold spend for Streak Up there. All of Goodnight Nick stuck around. Maybe that's why you don't see the gas pedal pushed fully down.
Yeah.
After an early kill, we got a lot of gold to spend. Let's just do these towers. We don't think Pandemonium is going to fight us around those. And so now, with 1 minute left on the FG buff, we can start warding and de-warding on the right side of the jungle. Pandemonium Gore, they didn't even show up to the last FG, and things have gotten a lot more dire in the gold department. XP is caught up just a little bit, everyone except the supports at level 20. But with the state of the game and 3 open Phoenixes, it'll be pretty telling the positioning of Pandemonium. You have secure potential with Hawk. You have steal potential. Just got to take it if you think you have a good fight.
I really like the positioning so far that Goodnight Nick have been taking, and the way that they've been approaching their fights. I mean, Ice has had no qualms getting into the backline of Pandemonium and causing them a lot of trouble. Hawk, I saw the last time around that their blink was on cooldown, now off cooldown. I don't know where Hawk used it, but I didn't see it necessarily save them or necessarily engage for them, so I'm going to be watching that. And the last fight, what happened was actually that big pivot. You had highlighted it. Hawk had looped around, actually right around where we see Shoxy Foxy, and gotten towards the backline of Goodnight Nick and kind of encapsulated them. And then Goodnight Nick looked happy with that positioning, which was really weird. They were enjoying it. We didn't get to see Hawk throw out many abilities, if any, in that position. Had to run back around the long way. It's been a lot of that fight not getting a lot done. So if the mid laner is a little more engaged in this next fight, then I expect that we'll see a little bit more put up from Pandemonium.
Everyone's got their actives as well. Everyone's got their ultimates online. It's all about warding and de-warding, as we've already mentioned. In that department, Goodnight Nick have the advantage around the underside of the FG pit. If Pandemonium step forward, Goodnight Nick will know it. We might not even get an FG fight, especially if Goodnight Nick able to find a pick here. Instead, Lord of the Afterlife gets used by Cherio. Goodnight Nick throw their hands up. They say, all right, that's a worthwhile trade for us. And now they're going to group up around this Fire Giant. There is one ward that I last saw for Pandemonium right around this part. And so Goodnight Nick will at least be spotted out in this area.
Now you're in a good spot. I mean, position-wise, look where Goodnight Nick are. They've got all 5 ults. You're missing the blink from Ice, but ultimately you've got control of the FG pit. You've got some good deep wards that are getting de-warded, so good on Pandemonium. It's actually going to be Shoxy Foxy who engages first.
Yeah, and I think he's regretting it immediately.
Oh,
so
my
is
God!
Oh, my! Where did the Cthulhu's health bar go? Into the grave, I guess, is the answer. Now Cherio is alone in the back. A double kill for Streak Up. Scattering to the wind is Pandemonium. Hawk is in the backline. Gets a kill on a Streak Up and Gore. That is huge. No more Hunter for Goodnight Nick to do these objectives. Joshi still has the ability to do damage and will do it in plenty to Okeano. Shoxy Foxy going to get chased down here. Should be the 4th kill of the fight for Goodnight Nick, and it will be, and it's Ice who gets it.
And honestly, I want to see him get aggressive. Take this Phoenix. You have more than enough capabilities to. Hawk is going to split push, might get a tier 2 at best, but you have just enough damage and plenty of time to be able to knock down this Phoenix.
Man.
Probably not finding a lot more than this, but still, this is a big win for him.
That's an important kill for Hawk. I mean, that's probably game over if Streak Up is still alive. But Streak Up is not still alive, and so Hawk, making plays for his team, takes a portal through. If Goodnight Nick had stuck around, that might have been one dead Giannis. But right side Phoenix goes down. 5 seconds away from Streak Up being back. You have about a 10-second window once Streak Up is back up before Shoxy and Joshi are on the map. So I want to see how quickly Goodnight Nick collapse back on this FG, see if they try to push that advantage. You'll head back towards it nonetheless, but starting it up is another question.
Deathwalker's 7-0-8.
Yeah,
15
is
total kills affected. Has 3 kills in this game that Goodnight Nick have gotten.
A lot of damage
Deathwalker
mitigated.
Wasn't a part of it. Yeah, should. And you know what? Rightfully should be. 10,000 up on the Cthulhu. And speaking of which, I mean, Kana and Shoxy Foxy just got burned during that last engagement.
Streak Up's melting.
I can't imagine they're feeling very confident getting aggressive here.
God, this Mulan has just looked great. And a lot of this. One stun arrow connects, and then the lockdown, the follow-up after that, has been very, very quick here from Goodnight Nick. And that's on a decent little cooldown there. Look at that damage that Shoxy Foxy takes. Sobek trying to close the gap and not feeling too good about it. Shoxy Foxy nearly dead here. Kana is dead here. You haven't learned not to step to Streak Up yet. And Kana gets one more reminder as to why. Immediately gone is this Cthulhu, 1-6. Talk about a difference in the solo lane here in this game. Enhanced Fire Giant is on the menu, and Goodnight Nick are eating.
And this time around, Hawk wasn't able to get into the backline, wasn't able to find that crucial turnaround kill. Still able to stay alive, and honestly, that's maybe more important to them right now. If you trade out life, let's say Streak Up for Hawk, your team's still in a worse off position in a 4v3 with one Phoenix exposed. But now, you've got a pretty good defense still going for you. Without Kana, it's going to be a little more shaky just due to lack of Cthulhu. But you've got a Warrior and that Osiris. But Ice is looking
nice.
deep.
Ice jumps over the wall. Hawk has to portal on out.
Oh, Shoxy.
Stun onto Shoxy Foxy. Gore, that was very southern of you. Oh, Shoxy, bless your heart is what I figured you were going to say next. And bless his heart indeed. Okeanos grabs the kill. Has taken a lot of damage in return, though. Joshi is still up. Mid lane Phoenix still stands as well, but you are staggering out these deaths, and that's important. 45 seconds before Shoxy Foxy comes back.
Yeah, now Kana's back up on the plate, so it's a lot more difficult for this team to, again, just barrel down through them. Although they haven't had as many issues killing off the Cthulhu as you would actually think, or you would like to think, in a lot of circumstances. This is a good spot for Goodnight Nick, though. Even though they don't get that Phoenix in the middle, they'll get a Fury here. It's an Oni Fury, so it makes it even more valuable for them, especially on the right-hand lane. Yep. But you also get to go spend what I'm going to assume is, a lot of gold, most around 2,000, 1,500 there for Ice. Worst case scenario, you're upgrading some relics or getting wards and some potions. Best case scenario, you're maybe finishing off an item or a starter, which I believe Streak Up just did. And so you're going to be able to set up a lot for this next fight. And this next fight, admittedly, can happen wherever you damn well want it to. I mean, you can go get the Pyromancer. I doubt Pandamonium are going to step up to that. And so the 2 Phoenixes still exposed, one respawning relatively soon. I wouldn't be surprised for Goodnight Nick to be looking for a tear sometime.
Yeah, luckily for Pandemonium, the right wave has been pushed out just a little bit. That's going to be not for long, though. It's a fire wave and an Oni fire wave on the right side of the map are going to catch up with the standard waves for Pandemonium, and that's maybe where Goodnight Nick elect to play around. But look at this, Pandemonium in between everyone from Goodnight Nick. The collapse is here, and it's a massive ultimate from Deathwalker, but he's stunned on out of it, and he's taken a whole lot from Joshi, but it does not matter. Deathwalker, divine in game number 3. Goodnight Nick find all the kills they're looking for. Hawk and Shoxy Foxy, the last 2 alive. The right side Phoenix is going to get worked down by this Oni Fire Wave, and Goodnight Nick can walk him on in.
Yeah, Ice seems to be just fine playing distraction and forcing Hawk into an awkward spot. In fact, Hawk, oh my god, turns around a lot of damage, but can he live?
Ice goes up and down, and Hawk will have to go back to base the old-fashioned way. Unstable Vortex dashed on out by Ice, and then the beads avoid the portal, and Ice plays it perfectly. And in the meantime, Goodnight Nick will walk on in and take game 3.
I mean, again, back and forth in game 1 at the very beginning, and then kind of escalates heavily into Goodnight Nick's favor. Game 2, they came out running, and then Pandemonium caught up.
Hit the brakes.
And then eventually, they are able to surpass them. This time around, they controlled it fairly early on. There was a little bit of back and forth in the kills, but the gold was always leaning in favor of Goodnight Nick, and they really were able to hammer it home.
Hey, Goodnight Nick, they show up here in an important game number 3. I mean, look, Deathwalker just controls this game.
9-0-10? 9-0-10-0-9?
Divine at least by the end of it. And the carries, they were there to do the rest of their damage as well. Streak Up on the Izanami. looked very good here.
Yeah.
Goodnight, Nick. They take this one in 3 somewhat lengthy games here. That's it for the EU portion of our day. Gore and I will take a break. And when we come back, the desk will round this one out.
I want to take off my jacket for this one. Oh, dude, this.
No, I know he was supposed to take you out last weekend, but he got busy.
Hello and welcome back to the Smite Challenger Circuit. The set for Goodnight Nick and Pandamonium has wrapped up. But if you've missed out on any of the content that we've put out with some of our professional players, any of the behind-the-scenes videos, or even just some of the more silly videos that we've done for our pros and with our pros, you can go to youtube.com/SmitePro in order to catch all of that behind-the-scenes action as highlighted by the video before. So one more time, youtube.com/SmitePro to get all the inside actions to what goes on here behind the scenes and with our pros. Jim Tucker and Taco join me one more time here to break down game number 3 of Goodnight Nick and Pandamonium. And The start of the game, that looked like the Deathwalker show. I mean, this man is out there really putting on a show for us with this Mulan solo, kind of an out-of-pocket pick, more so just for him. And I mean, he kind of made me a believer of Mulan solo.
Well, if there's one period of the game where you really want to shine with Mulan, it's certainly going to be in that early to mid-game of the laning phase, and I think that all of that established pressure from Deathwalker certainly did a lot of favors there for Goodnight Nick. Ice especially, I think, had so much mobility and freedom to move, I should add, with this circuit that it just became practically impossible for Kana to really keep up, because Cthulhu, sure, we know he can be a sponge in terms of damage absorption, but what good is it if the entirety of Goodnight Nick is already at the point of which they can just turn and burn entirely?
I think the fact that this solo laner was able to go 13.5 on a KDA and 30,000 player damage with Mulan, and that fight in particular around that back heartbeat camp was kind of the pinnacle of what Mulan can do. She's got good CC with her ultimate, some decent damage, but the mobility and flexibility she has with that grapple, whether you want to grab a target or use the wall as your target in order to pull yourself towards it, plus just the raw damage output she can do. Mulan's a little crazy, and not a lot of people have the opportunity to actually see her in action, so I think this game is a good highlight of what Mulan is capable of.
Also, just a tough scenario in general there for Joshi. It seems like just about everything on Goodnight Nick was practically designed to kill him. Even though he was able to find some success, unfortunately, it was not to the same caliber of that which Goodnight Nick. And Goodnight Nick, despite having Okeanos in the support role, substituting there for Milzy, still manages to help them close out this set.
And looking at the damage values, it's not even close with anyone else aside from Joshi, who was 6,000 damage under Deathwalker. The rest of his team, 9,000 or more damage, well behind Ford. So a bit of a tribute to just how well that Deathwalker was able to perform with this god. And looking forward to see if maybe we get to see some more action from that Mulan as the phase continues on.
Yeah, it'll definitely be something to keep an eye out for, that's for sure.
Well, let's take a look at the standings and the schedule for what you may have missed. Let's go ahead and pop that up there for you guys. If you missed any of the action so far today, Team Joystick and Snake Hunters was our first set of the day. That ended with a nice 2-1 victory for Team Joystick. And now here in our second set for EU, Pandamonium fell to Goodnight Nick in a 2-1 fashion. All the same for it. Next up, we have North America. That'll be Sturdy Artisans and Sleekness and Tiburones and Herculean Hooves as our matchups for today. Remember, those are all happening today. But before we get to the NA standings and everything like that, let's take one final look at our EU standings going into the end of this segment for it. Elysium's still sitting at the top, and Goodnight Nick jumped from that 5th seed all the way up to a nice 3rd seed.
A very impactful set for sure for Goodnight Nick to find a set victory here. And granted, they're still a ways off from catching up to Joystick and Elysium there, who are definitely sitting pretty in that 1st and 2nd of the standings. But that's not to say that things couldn't change. I mean, we're hardly ever... I wouldn't even consider this the halfway point, really.
Yeah, I mean, we're currently sitting 5 games through. I believe there are still another 5 for one more phase of round robin before these teams would kind of culminate in and make a playoff standing for it in towards the later half of the year. But kind of looking at just where these teams are sitting right now, there's kind of this, I wouldn't even necessarily anymore call it a clear-cut gap of where the EU stands, because it's only the halfway point. Pandemonium's made a bunch of roster shakeups. Goodnight Nick, with their support, show that they have some potential for it. But that's enough about EU. Let's talk a little bit about NA, because they're going to be our next 2 matchups that we're going to see through. And immediately into the standings, we take a look. Herculean Hooves and Winter Dogs sitting at the top, with the Hooves beating out the Winter Dogs last week. And with our first match of Sturdy Artisans and Sleekness, both of them sitting at that 2-2, this is going to be a big battle for 3rd place.
Yeah, this is exactly where you want to sort of break away from that question in the air of, hey, are we going to be in 3rd? Are we going to be in 4th? And I think for either of these teams, if you really want to pose a threat towards Herculean Hooves and Winter Dogs, it starts with just establishing 3rd.
And Tiburones are going to be taking on the Herculean Hooves as our final set of the day. We still got plenty of Smite Challenger Circuit action available for you guys, available for today. And we'll still have a couple of those sets happening on the weekend after the SPL playoffs are taking place on Saturday and Sunday. So don't fret. If you missed any SCC, we're still here the rest of today, and we still got more action for you as the weekend goes through. I'm very excited to see how all this can break out. We're going to take it to a quick break, and then we'll come back with our first NA SCC set of the day.